I crouched on a pile of discarded alloy plates, the plasma cutter in my hand humming with a low, steady drone. My fingers were rough, the cracks in my skin permanently stained with metallic dust that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Above me, the sky of scrap star number 3 was a perpetual, suffocating gray. A gust of wind hit me, carrying the sharp stench of sulfur dioxide and rust, forcing its way into my tattered protective suit. Today's haul was pathetic. I shoved a relatively intact circuit board into my recycling bag and wiped the black soot from my face. It was barely enough to trade for a single synthetic protein cake. I had been a scavenger on this rock for 10 years. Every day was the same: dig, cut, sort, and sell. It was a hard life, but it was stable. At least I wasn't like the unlucky bastards dying deep in the mines with no one to bury them. I stood up, my lower back aching. My eyes drifted toward a collapsed steel structure in the distance. It used to be a federal processing station back in the old era, but most of it had been swallowed by the shifting ground. I was ready to call it a day, but a flicker of light caught my eye. It was faint, like a stray reflection of the setting sun on metal, but the angle was wrong. There were no windows in that corner. I squinted, hesitated for 3 seconds, and then started walking. I picked my way through the rubble and twisted rebar, descending carefully into the depths of the ruins. As I got closer to the light, the temperature rose. The air smelled faintly of ozone. Then I saw it. It was a metal sphere about the size of my fist, solid silver, and shimmering with a liquid-like luster. It sat quietly on a patch of mossy wall between some old iron pipes, looking like it was waiting for someone. I frowned. I'd seen plenty of strange things on this planet, but I couldn't identify this material. It wasn't Federation tech, and it wasn't Star Alliance alloy. This was something much more advanced. Driven by a sudden, inexplicable urge, I reached out. My fingertip brushed the sphere. In an instant, a cold, mechanical voice exploded inside my head. Compatible host detected. Vital signs matched. Neural frequency matched. Soul magnetic field matched. Binding complete. Welcome to the Truth or Dare game system. I froze. My pupils shrunk, and the veins on my forehead began to throb. This wasn't a hallucination. The voice was echoing from deep within my consciousness, like something had burrowed into my brain. What the hell was this? I tried to shake the sphere off, but it had already melted into a pool of silver liquid. It flowed across my palm, up my wrist, and disappeared completely under my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs like a drum. I checked my arm immediately. No wound. No mark. It was as if the sphere had never existed. But something new was in my head. A translucent countdown panel flickered at the edge of my vision. 10, 9, 8. The numbers were ticking down. Warning. The first game is about to begin. Please prepare, host. Rules will be issued automatically after the countdown. Cold sweat drenched my back. Wait, I hissed, my forehead dripping. What game? What are you talking about? The system didn't answer. 7, 6, 5. My mind raced. I had survived 10 years on this scrap heap because of my sharp instincts for danger. This system was a problem. It didn't ask for permission. It just bound itself to me and gave me 0 time to prepare. When the timer hit 3, I grit my teeth and forced myself to calm down. I couldn't run. I had to face it. I thought of the worst-case scenario. If this game was a death trap, I'd at least make this system realize I wasn't a lamb for the slaughter. The countdown hit 0. Ding. Round 1 of Truth or Dare is starting. Opponent character generating. Target locked. Scrap star number 3, Scavenger Camp, codename, Old Ba. Location, Central Plaza behind the Scavenger Camp. Distance, 800 meters. Time limit, 5 minutes. Please proceed to the location to start the first duel. My face went pale. Old Ba? My breathing turned shallow. Old Ba was the de facto ruler of the Scavenger Camp. He led 20 cutthroats and was the only man on the planet who owned a real energy pistol. I remembered a scavenger who once stole some of Old Ba's supplies. Old Ba broke both the man's legs in front of everyone and threw him into the deep mines to rot. And now I had to go play a game with a man like that? I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. The system seemed to sense my hesitation. The cold voice spoke again. Friendly reminder. If the host fails to reach the location within the time limit, the game will be judged a failure. Penalty for failure. Randomly erase one of the host's vital organs. Countdown started. For minutes, 59 seconds. I took a sharp breath of the rusty air. You're a psycho, I cursed under my breath. A total psycho. But I didn't have time to argue. I bolted. I sprinted toward the camp, my boots kicking up dust and gravel. My old protective suit flapped in the wind. My eyes sharpened. This was the look of a man who had spent a decade fighting for every breath. Pure, raw desperation. My legs felt like they were being pushed by an invisible force, accelerating beyond my control. I stumbled down a slope, my lungs burning like a bellows. 3 minutes and 52 seconds left. I had to get to the camp. I had to face the bully I had spent 3 years avoiding. Damn it, I growled, shoving a discarded pipe out of my way. It clattered against a pile of empty cans with a deafening ring. I skidded to a halt. The camp was 50 meters ahead. It was a cluster of tattered tents and walls made of rusted shipping containers. A group of men from the Iron Glove Gang sat around a fire. One of them, a man with a face full of scars and a rusted wire glove on his right hand, was roasting a piece of unidentifiable meat on a spike. That was Old Ba. My heart did a painful somersault. I ducked behind a container, sweat pouring off me. 3 years of scavenging told me that crossing the Iron Glove Gang meant one thing: getting stuffed into a trash compactor and turned into a meat patty. 2 minutes and 18 seconds left. The system's voice rang in my head again. The air felt heavy and cold as I tightened my fists. My eyes scanned the area around Old Ba, landing on a scrawny lackey wearing a peaked cap. He was hunched over, fiddling with an energy gun. The kid looked barely 20, his eyes darting around nervously, constantly stealing glances at Old Ba. I decided right then. He was my target. I took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the container. Hey, Old Ba, I called out. My voice echoed across the empty scrapyard, sounding raspy and slightly trembling. The men by the fire turned at once. Old Ba narrowed his eyes, his lips curling into a cruel, twisted grin. Well, if it isn't our little mouse, he sneered. I heard you picked up something good a few days ago. I didn't answer him. Instead, I stared intensely at the scrawny lackey. My gaze was burning. Suddenly, the system flared to life in my mind. Asterisk game starting. Opponent detected. Iron Glove Gang member, Ma-san. Game mode. Truth or dare. Round 1. Truth. Question. State the location where you hid the stolen gang funds. Asterisk. My pupils contracted. Stolen funds? This kid? Ma-san's entire body froze. His eyes bulged, and his mouth flew open against his will. The words sounded like they were being ripped out of his throat. I hid 3 crates of black gold coins in the abandoned cold storage north of the camp. The second the words left his mouth, Ma-san's face turned ghostly white. He slapped a hand over his mouth, looking at me in pure terror before whipping his head toward Old Ba. The air around the campfire instantly turned to ice. What did you just say? Old Ba's voice was low, vibrating with lethal intent. Ma-san shook his head frantically. No, boss, I didn't say anything. You think I'm deaf? Old Ba roared, lunging to his feet. He slammed his iron glove onto a metal barrel with a deafening clang. 3 crates of black gold. That was the payment from the arms dealers last month. Boss, I really didn't. It was that kid. He did something to me. Ma-san pointed at me, his fingers shaking uncontrollably. I stood my ground, forcing myself to remain calm. My mind was racing. It's real. This damn system can actually force people to tell the truth. But my relief didn't last long. A warning blared in my head. Warning. Opponent has detected an anomaly. According to the rules, the opponent has 1 chance to counterattack. If the opponent questions the game's legitimacy, the match becomes an equal duel. If the host fails to answer the opponent's question directly, the penalty will reflect back onto the host. Penalty. Erasure of the left vocal cord. A chill ran down my spine. What? I hissed through my teeth. The system didn't respond, but Old Ba was already in my face. His iron glove gleamed a dull, rusty red in the firelight. Kid, he growled, his voice thick with killing intent. Was it you? Did you make him say that? My brain worked at light speed. I knew if I admitted it, Old Ba's rage would incinerate me. But if I didn't, the system would count it as a loss. Mawson had already sensed something was wrong. I had to lean into it. Yeah, it was me, I said, looking up with a cryptic, half-crazy smile. I let a bit of madness leak into my eyes. I made him say it. What about it? Old Ba froze, a flash of confusion crossing his face. He was used to scavengers acting like terrified mice. He didn't know what to make of this. Had I finally lost my mind? Inside, I was panicking, but I had to keep the act going. If everyone thought I was a psycho, I might actually stand a chance at surviving. I managed to slip away from the camp, but the Iron Glove gang was faster than I expected. I hadn't even cleared 200 meters when 3 figures emerged from the shadows of a derelict spaceship. They blocked my path in a triangle formation. On the left was a bald guy swinging a modified alloy pipe welded with rusty nails. On the right, a tall, lanky man held a leaking laser pistol. In the middle stood the largest of the 3, his arms tattooed with the Iron Glove emblem, a fist crushing a skull. I stopped. Kid, you had a lot of fun back at the camp, didn't you? The big man in the middle sneered, showing off a row of yellow teeth. Ma-san is dead meat. Now, Old Ba wants you to put on a show for us. My heart hammered against my ribs. These weren't just bullies, they were killers. My rusted crowbar felt like a toothpick compared to that alloy pipe. I couldn't fight them. I couldn't run. I was trapped. Want to play a game? I forced a smile, though my voice shook. I love games. A game? The bald guy laughed, stepping forward. I'll let you play once I've smashed your teeth in. Asterisk, threat detected. System activating. Asterisk, the cold mechanical voice echoed in my head. Asterisk, enable dare mode. Note, multiple targets detected. System will randomly select one forced participant. Asterisk. Enable it. I thought desperately. Instantly, the bald guy froze. The alloy pipe clattered to the ground. His back snapped straight, as if an invisible wire was pulling him up. What the hell are you doing? The lanky guy started to ask. The bald man turned his head, a bizarre, haunting smile plastered on his face. Then, he started to dance. It wasn't just a twitch, it was full-blown ballet. A 2-meter-tall brute was spinning on his tiptoes, his arms arched gracefully over his head. Holy crap, the lanky guy yelled, stumbling back. The bald man ignored him, his eyes wide with pure horror, while his body performed one elegant move after another. What are you doing to me? He wailed, his voice cracking. A surge of wild joy hit me, but I kept my face neutral. I leaned against the rusted hull of the spaceship, crossing my arms and tilting my head. I watched the performance with a faint, bored smile. Not bad, I remarked coolly. But your form is a bit off. Get that leg higher. The bald man's right leg snapped upward, nearly hitting his own nose. He let out a strangled scream, tears streaming down his face. The other 2 men traded looks of sheer terror. I'll kill you, the big man roared, drawing an alloy blade and lunging at me. Asterisk warning, multi-target attack. Selecting new target, asterisk. The big man stopped mid-charge. His body contorted into a strange pose, one leg forward, one leg back, his hands circling in front of him. He looked like he was performing a traditional folk dance. A second later, he joined the bald man. Under the shadow of the dead spaceship, 2 hulking killers were spinning on their toes in perfect synchronization, as if they had rehearsed this for years. The lanky guy with the laser pistol just stood there, completely paralyzed with fear. The lanky guy just stood there, staring at the bizarre scene. He was so stunned he forgot to even raise his laser pistol. I took a deep breath, forcing my shaking legs to stay steady, and started walking toward him. Every step felt like I was on the verge of a total breakdown, but I knew I couldn't show a hint of fear. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. I reached him and reached out, lightly patting his cheek. What about you? I whispered. I tried to make my voice sound casual, dangerous. Do you want to join them for a dance? The lanky guy snapped out of it. He stumbled back, and the laser pistol clattered to the ground. I bent down and picked it up, tossing it slightly in my hand. I had no idea how to actually use the thing, but that didn't stop me from acting like a pro. Go back and tell old Ba, I said, turning my back on the 3 of them. This was just the appetizer. As soon as the words left my mouth, the bald man's dancing stopped abruptly. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, his face a mess of tears and snot. The big man crashed down next to him, his legs still twitching uncontrollably. I didn't look back. I walked straight into the shadows. The moment I was out of their sight, my legs gave out. I dropped to my knees, my back soaked in cold sweat. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my throat. I did it, I muttered, my voice trembling. But then, the cold, mechanical voice of the system rang out again. Asterisk ding. Player Old Ba has been locked as the next mandatory game target. Countdown. 23 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds. Failure to complete the game within the time limit will result in a random penalty. Asterisk. The smile froze on my face. I had less than 24 hours. I leaned against a corrugated metal wall next to a pile of trash, breathing hard. The countdown was like a time bomb embedded in my brain. Old Ba. I gritted my teeth as I repeated the name. He was the leader of the Iron Glove Gang, a ruthless man who ruled this sector of the trash planet. Word was he had at least 5 murders under his belt. A man like that was the system's next target. And even worse, I had to finish the game within a day. I rubbed my temples hard. Those 3 thugs from before were just small-time losers. The system could control them easily. But a seasoned veteran who lived by the blade like Old Ba, he wouldn't be such an easy mark. I looked down at my left hand. Controlling those 2 brutes to dance ballet had drained a lot of my stamina. My arm was still shaking. I couldn't just go straight to Old Ba. I needed to scout the situation first. I crept back to the intersection and saw the 3 thugs were still there. The bald guy and the brute were slumped on the ground, while the lanky one was crouching nearby, shivering. I took a breath and stepped out of the shadows. You, what do you want now? The lanky guy stammered, backing away. The other 2 flinched, struggling to sit up. I didn't say a word. I walked up to them and looked down with a cold stare. Where is your second in command? They traded looks. The bald man's lips trembled. Why? Why are you looking for Brother Dao? Lead the way, I said. My tone was flat, but I made sure it carried a chilling weight they couldn't ignore. The lanky guy scrambled to his feet. I'll take you. I'll take you. 20 minutes later, we arrived at the door of an abandoned warehouse. Brother Dao is inside. The lanky guy whispered, his voice barely audible. I waved them off, and they ran away as if they'd been granted a death row pardon. The warehouse door wasn't locked. I pushed it open, wincing at the sharp smell of stale cigarettes and engine oil. Inside, a bald, muscular man was lying on a cot, smoking. A shotgun sat right next to him. Who's there? He snapped upright, pointing the barrel straight at me. My heart raced, but I kept my face like stone. You're Brother Dao, right? I'm here to ask a few questions. Brother Dao narrowed his eyes, his gaze cutting through me like a knife. Who the hell are you? Someone you can't afford to provoke. As I spoke, the system prompt appeared. Initiate truth or dare against target, Brother Dao? I thought the word, yes. Asterisk game mode, truth. Please ask your question, asterisk. I looked at Brother Dao. Where is the Iron Glove Gang's weapon cache in the South District? Brother Dao's expression shifted. He opened his mouth to curse me out, but an invisible force suddenly bound him. His jaw moved against his will. The basement in the South District ruins. His eyes widened in pure shock the moment the words came out. I felt a surge of excitement and pressed on. Where does Old Ba usually stay? How many people are with him? Brother Dao's mouth opened automatically again. Old Ba is at the Scrap City Casino today. He has 4 personal bodyguards and 20 outsiders. Halfway through the sentence, he suddenly clamped his mouth shut. His eyes turned blood red as he glared at me. Asterisk warning. Target possesses extreme willpower. Partial control broken. Target has gained 1 counterattack opportunity. Asterisk. Brother Dao's lips curled into a gruesome smile. You're playing tricks on me, you little brat. My heart sank. Brother Dao stared at me, his voice dropping to a low growl. Kid, are you scared? A chill surged from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. I wanted to deny it, but my mouth wouldn't obey. The cold system voice echoed. Asterisk mandatory answer in effect. Answer. Yes. Asterisk. Yes. The word popped out of my mouth like a blade cutting my throat. The next second, a sharp pain exploded in my left arm. It felt like thousands of needles were being driven into the bone all at once. It went numb and then completely limp, hanging uselessly at my side. I grit my teeth, my face turning deathly pale for a moment. Seeing my reaction, Brother Dao let out a cruel laugh. I knew it. Just a kid who hasn't even grown hair yet. One little scare, and you lose your mind. Huh. I looked down at my dead left arm, then looked back up. This time, my lips curled into a smile tinged with madness. What was a little penalty like this? I tilted my head, staring at him calmly. You think I'm scared? Brother Dao's laughter stopped instantly. I took a step forward. Even though my left arm was hanging there like it was broken, I shrugged as if it were nothing. I answered yes on purpose. I lied, a sick sense of excitement bubbling up in my voice. I wanted to see how much the penalty hurt. It's not bad. Is that all you've got? Brother Dao froze. This kid had just turned white as a sheet, and now he was smiling? It wasn't normal. He wasn't sane. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs, and sweat was pouring down my back. But I knew if I showed even a flicker of weakness, that shotgun would end me. So I laughed louder. Did you really think I'd be stupid enough to walk into a dead end? Brother Dao's pupils shivered. He subconsciously took half a step back. Seeing that flash of hesitation, I pushed harder. Do you know what I made those 3 losers do earlier? His face went pale. I moved closer, step by step. Ballet. Brother Dao gripped his shotgun, his shoulders tensing up. Do you want to be next? Asterisk warning, target's counterattack triggered. If the player fails to intimidate the opponent after a counterattack, additional penalties will apply. Current target status, successfully intimidated, asterisk. Brother Dao ground his teeth, staring at me, but his palms were dripping with sweat. I glanced down at my left arm. It was completely numb, hanging there like a piece of dead weight. I looked at it for a moment, admiring the damage as if it were a piece of modern art. Then I looked back at Brother Dao and smiled. Ready for another round? I asked. The warehouse fell deathly silent for a few seconds. Suddenly, Brother Dao's eye twitched. The hand gripping the shotgun slowly relaxed, and he took a long, shaky breath. You're a damn lunatic, he spat. Inside, I let out a massive sigh of relief, but I kept the reckless grin plastered on my face. A lunatic? Thanks for the compliment. I turned and walked toward the exit, my left arm swinging uselessly at my side like a broken doll. Just as I stepped over the threshold, I looked back at him one last time. By the way, I said, give my regards to Lao Ba. Brother Dao froze, his eyes filled with a mix of intense wariness and confusion. I didn't wait for a response. I kept walking until I hit the corner of the alley, and then my legs finally gave out. I slid down the wall and collapsed onto the dirt. I used my right hand to cover my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. My left arm was totally paralyzed. Damn, that penalty was brutal. That counterattack had nearly ended me right then and there. My head rang with a system notification. Countdown to mandatory game target, Lao Ba. 22 hours, 17 minutes, 23 seconds. I gritted my teeth. 22 hours left, and I hadn't even seen Lao Ba's face yet. Plus, my left arm was useless. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. I couldn't afford to mess up the next game. I leaned against the wall in the shadows, fumbling for a cigarette with my one working hand. My fingers were shaking so badly it took 3 tries just to light the match. System, I whispered, exhaling a cloud of smoke. Can my arm be fixed? The cold voice echoed in my head. Asterisk player sustained mandatory counter damage. Paralysis effect will last 6 to 8 hours. It is recommended to avoid high-difficulty games until recovery, asterisk. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. 6 to 8 hours? I only had 22 left. I didn't have time to wait. Just as I was trying to map out my next move, heavy footsteps echoed from the mouth of the alley. 3 tall figures stepped into the glow of the street lamp. They were wearing leather jackets covered in metal studs, and their waistbands were bulging with weapons. The leader was a bald man with a jagged white scar running from his eyebrow down to his chin. So you're the psycho who made people bark like dogs at the market? The bald man asked. I didn't get up. I didn't even look at him. I just took a slow drag of my cigarette. If you have business, say it. If not, get lost. The bald man sneered. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a silver metal badge engraved with a coiled red snake. The Red Snake Gang. I knew the name. They were one of the biggest interstellar pirate organizations on this junk planet. Even the Iron Glove Gang gave them a wide berth. And I asked, Our boss heard you've got talent, the bald man said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. You're coming with us. You go, you live. You stay, you die now. I looked at my dead arm, then at the gun tucked into his belt. Refusing would just be suicide. I crushed my cigarette, pushed myself off the wall, and stood up. My body swayed for a second, and I had to lean against the bricks to steady myself. Lead the way, I said. The bald man looked surprised. He probably expected a fight, but I wasn't in the mood to be difficult. He grinned, signaled to his 2 men, and we set off. They led me through a maze of decaying streets and into a derelict industrial zone. The air smelled like a foul mix of engine oil and rust. We stopped in front of a 3-story factory building, and the bald man shoved open a rusted iron door. Inside, the space had been converted into a hideout. It was dimly lit, filled with smoke, and smelled like cheap booze. A dozen pirates were scattered around, some playing cards, others cleaning weapons. At the far end of the room, a man in his 40s sat in a large chair. He had a thick beard, a shaved head, and was casually spinning a silver pistol in his right hand. The captain of the Red Snake gang. Boss, I brought him, the bald man said, stepping aside. The captain looked me up and down. His gaze lingered on my limp left arm for a moment, and a playful smirk touched his lips. I heard you can make people tell the truth, kid. I walked into the room, scanning every face in the crowd. I found an empty wooden crate, sat down, and crossed my legs. I can do more than make them tell the truth. I can make them do interesting things. The captain stopped spinning his gun and leaned forward, his eyes sharpening. Interesting things? Like what? I let a slow smile spread across my face. Like making you bark like a dog right here in front of everyone. The room went dead silent. The card players stopped their game. The men cleaning guns looked up. Every pair of eyes in that room turned into a blade aimed at my throat. The bald man's face darkened, and he reached for his weapon. The captain raised a hand to stop him. He wasn't angry. Instead, he raised an eyebrow, looking genuinely amused. Interesting. A bit too arrogant, though. I leaned back against the wall, pointing my right finger toward the ceiling. Arrogance is a habit of mine. What? Is the great captain afraid to play around? The room erupted in hushed murmurs. A nobody scavenger from a junk planet was actually challenging the leader of the Red Snakes. The captain stared at me in silence for a few seconds, then suddenly burst out laughing. Interesting. Truly interesting. He wiped a tear from his eye and waved to one of his subordinates. Get this kid a drink. I want to see if he's actually talented or just looking for a quick way to die. A female pirate brought over a glass of murky liquid. I didn't touch it. I just kept my eyes locked on the captain. I only play by my own rules, I said. Are you in or out? The rules are simple. I tell a truth, and then you pick someone to perform a dare. If you lose, the penalty doubles. A spark of excitement flashed in the captain's eyes. He sat up straight and slammed his silver pistol onto the table. Fine, I'll play your game. A system notification chimed in my brain. Asterisk game activated. Opponent, Red Snake Captain. Rank, B. Current turn, Lin Yuan goes first, asterisk. I took a deep breath and activated the dare mode in my mind. I choose you, Captain, I said loudly. Bark like a dog 3 times in front of your crew. The captain's smile froze. The background noise of the room vanished instantly. Everyone stared at him, eyes wide. A second later, the captain's throat moved involuntarily. Woof, 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 3 barks. Clear, loud, and echoing through the silent factory. The pirates were stunned. Someone dropped their glass, and it shattered on the floor. Another man accidentally pulled his trigger, sending a bullet ricocheting off the wall. The muscles in the captain's face twitched violently. Veins popped out on his forehead as he gripped the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. You're dead, he roared, snatching his pistol and aiming it straight at my head. The system alarm blared in my mind. Asterisk warning. Opponent has lost emotional control. 90% probability of physical attack. Asterisk. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression cool and mocking. What's the matter, Captain? Can't handle the game. The captain glared at me, his finger trembling on the trigger. The bald man leaned in and whispered, Boss, something's wrong with this kid. Don't be rash. The captain stared at me with eyes cold enough to skin me alive. After a few agonizing seconds, He lowered the gun. Throw him in the lockup, he barked at his men. Nobody lets him out without my word. Two pirates grabbed me by the shoulders. I didn't resist as they dragged me toward the back. As I passed the captain, I leaned in and grinned. Nice form, Captain. You sounded just like a pro. The captain's face turned blacker than a burnt pot. He slammed his hand down, shattering the wooden table into splinters. Before I could say another word, two pirates grabbed my arms and dragged me deep into the factory. They threw me into a cramped, sheet metal shack and slammed the door. The lock clicked from the outside. The only light came from a tiny vent high above my head. I slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor. Only then did the adrenaline fade, replaced by a wave of cold sweat that soaked my back. I had played it too risky. I was lucky he hadn't blown my brains out right then and there. My mind buzzed as the system notification popped up again. I had exactly 21 hours, 3 minutes, and 47 seconds left to complete the mandatory game against my target, Old Ba. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. 21 hours. And I was stuck in a cage. A light tapping of footsteps echoed outside. Then, the sound of a key turning in the lock. The door creaked open, and the bald giant, Li Zhuang, stepped in. He was holding a metal tray with 2 pieces of compressed biscuit and a jug of water. I squinted at him, a faint smirk tugging at my lips. Not bad. You guys actually feed your prisoners. Li Zhuang set the tray down without a word. He turned to leave, but I called out to him. Wait. He stopped and looked back, his eyes filled with suspicion and a hint of disdain. What kind of tricks are you trying to pull now? I'm bored, I said, leaning back against the wall in a lazy posture. Want to play around? Are you kidding me? He spat. Just a simple game of truth, I said. I'm locked in a box. What could I possibly do to you? Or are you too scared? Li Zhuang stared at me for a long time. Finally, he let out a cold laugh. Fine. I'll play your little game. The system chimed in my head. Asterisk target confirmed. Li Zhuang, member of the Red Snake Gang. Rank, Tier 1 fighter. Matching rules, mutual consent. My eyelid flickered. A Tier 1 fighter? On a junk planet like this, that made him a heavy hitter. A guy like him earned more in a day than a normal scavenger made in 3 months. You go first, I said. Li Zhuang didn't hesitate. Who the hell are you? Where did you come from? If I told you I was a retired Special Forces soldier from the Federation, would you believe me? Bullshit, he growled. Then why bother asking? I took a bite of the biscuit. It was hard as a rock and crunched loudly in the quiet room. The system pinged. Question failed. Answer did not meet standards. Invalid question. Li Zhuang's expression shifted. He tried again. How long have you been surviving on this junk planet? 3 years, I answered simply. And why did you come here? I held up one finger. That's 2 questions. My turn. Li Zhuang frowned, but he nodded. Ask. Is the Red Snake Gang planning to move against Old Boss soon? Li Zhuang's pupils shrank. He instinctively took a half-step back, his hand twitching toward his waist. You. Relax, I said, waving a hand dismissively. Just a casual question. Now, it's your turn for question number 2. He went silent for a few seconds, his voice dropping to a low mumble. That thing you did earlier. What kind of ability is that? A game, I smiled. Truth or dare. Ever heard of it? That's it. He stared at me like I was crazy. Then he started to laugh. Interesting. Okay, my turn again. If you had lost that game where you made the captain bark like a dog, what would have happened to you? My heart skipped a beat. He had hit a nerve. The loser accepts the penalty, I said calmly. You can take that as my answer. Asterisk question successful. Answer valid. Asterisk. Li Zhuang's eyes lit up. Have you ever lost before? I have. And what was the penalty? That's the 3rd question, I said, stretching my arms. This time, let's switch to dare. Li Zhuang blinked. Then a grin spread across his face. Sure. How do we play? Simple. I took a sip of water. I give you an action. If you can do it, you win. If you can't, you lose. 3 rounds. Best 2 out of 3. Once we're done, you can leave. You think I'm stupid? He asked. What if you tell me to kill myself? Look around, I said, my voice light. It's a metal box. What could possibly happen to you in here? Just 3 rounds. He hesitated, then nodded. Game mode, dare. Rounds, best of 3. I leaned against the wall, my eyes locked on his face. Round 1. Do 30 push-ups right here, right now. Do you dare? Li Zhuang laughed. That's it. He dropped to the floor without another word and knocked out 30 perfect push-ups. He didn't even break a sweat. Round 1. I lost. My heart sank. My body hadn't fully recovered yet, and my left arm was still numb. If I had to do 30 push-ups, I would have collapsed by the 20th. Round 2. I said, my voice steady. Slap yourself in the face 10 times. Hard. Li Zhuang's face twisted. Are you mocking me? What? Are you scared? I looked at him provocatively. You're in your own base, and you're afraid to slap yourself? His expression soured. He glanced at the door to make sure no one was watching, then raised his hand. Slap. 1. Slap. 2. By the third one, his cheek was bright red. He gritted his teeth and finished all 10. Round 2. I lost. My chest tightened. That was 2 losses. I had already lost the match. The penalty was coming for me. My turn, Li Zhuang said with a sneer. Round 3. I took a deep breath. Go ahead. Spin in a circle 30 times as fast as you can. Then, immediately do 3 squats. My stomach turned. I was from Earth. My sense of balance was tuned for lower gravity. Doing 30 spins and then squats in this high-gravity environment would make me vomit or pass out. Fine, I said. I stood up and started spinning. 1 lap. 2. The world began to tilt. By 15 laps, my legs felt like jelly. By 20, my stomach was doing somersaults. At 27, I stumbled and hit the wall. I felt the bile rising in my throat, but I forced myself to swallow it down. Done, I rasped, leaning against the wall for support. Squats. I gritted my teeth and lowered myself down. I stood back up, then down again. On the third time I tried to stand, my vision suddenly went pitch black. I crumpled to the floor. Asterisk dare failed. Penalty activated. Blindness for 11 minutes. Asterisk. I was plunged into total darkness. I heard Li Zhuang's footsteps approaching. He knelt beside me, his voice dripping with mockery. What's wrong, buddy? Get up. I didn't answer. I focused everything on the darkness, straining my ears to map out the room. Footsteps. Breathing. Li Zhuang's breath was steady, 1 every 4 seconds. He was standing with his weight on his left foot. You done already? He asked, walking in a half circle around me. I thought you were special. I let out a soft laugh. 1 last round, I said. Do you dare play again? His footsteps stopped. You're blind and you still want to play? I'll bet the dagger you have on your belt, I said, my voice dangerously calm. If you win, I'll swallow it. Li Zhuang went silent for a few seconds. Then he gave a cold snort. Fine. This dare is simple. If you can touch my face within 10 seconds, you win. Deal. I took a deep breath and stood up slowly. I listened. His breathing was to my left, about 1.5 meters away. I took a step to the right. His breathing rhythm didn't change. I took another step. I heard a tiny shift, the sound of muscle tensing. I suddenly lunged 3 steps to the left, my right arm swinging wide. My hand slammed into cold, hard metal. The door. Li Zhuang laughed from across the room. Brother, you're not even close. I ignored him. My ears twitched. Breathing, 3 o'clock direction. About 2 meters. My head was still spinning, and my balance was shot, but my brain was working at light speed. After he laughed, he shifted his weight from his left foot to his right. He was preparing to retreat. He was trying to dodge. I spun around and lunged toward the 3 o'clock position. I moved faster than I thought I could. My palm connected with something rough and warm. The sound echoed through the small room. Li Zhuang froze. My hand slid across his nose, his mouth, his chin. Then, I reached down and snatched the dagger straight from his belt. I win this one. Li Zhuang's face went pale as he scrambled backward, away from me. Li Zhuang's breathing became ragged and fast. You're really blind? He stammered, his voice shaking with disbelief. You can verify that yourself, I replied, my voice cold. I gave the captured dagger a casual spin in my hand. Want to go another round? If you lose this time, you have to slap yourself 50 times. Li Zhuang's lips trembled. He didn't say a word. He turned and bolted. The heavy iron door slammed shut from the outside, the chains rattling and clanking as he locked me in. I heard his frantic footsteps fading into the distance. I leaned back against the cold wall and let out a long breath. Slowly, the world began to bleed back into focus. First came the blurry patches of light, then the rough texture of the metal walls, and finally, the sharp beam of white light cutting through the ventilation duct. I looked down at the dagger in my hand. A slow smirk spread across my face. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor. It wasn't just one person this time. A deep, gravelly voice boomed from behind the door. "Lin Yuan, right? The captain wants to see you." I tilted my head back and cracked my neck. My vision hadn't fully recovered, but I could make out the silhouettes of the men standing outside. There were at least 5 of them. 2 of them had steady, rhythmic breathing, warriors. This wasn't going to be a friendly invitation. The door was kicked open with a deafening bang, the metal plates slamming against the interior wall. 5 men filed in. Leading them was a bald giant with a jagged scar running from his eyebrow down to his jaw. He scanned the room, his eyes narrowing when they landed on the dagger in my hand. "Kid, you're quite the troublemaker," the bald man growled, grinning to reveal a mouthful of yellow teeth. That cowardly Zhuang ran off so scared, he even dropped his blade. I stayed leaned against the wall, my left arm hanging uselessly at my side. I flipped the dagger between my fingers. "The captain wants me. Tell him to come here himself." "Cut the crap," a tall, thin man behind the bald giant snapped. He stepped forward, flipping his hand to reveal an ion pistol. He aimed it straight at my head. "The captain said he wants you alive. If you're smart, you'll walk out on your own. If we have to get our hands dirty." He didn't finish. I started laughing. It was a low, raspy sound that echoed eerily in the cramped metal room. The bald man frowned, instinctively taking half a step back. One second I was laughing, and the next I moved. I flicked my wrist. The dagger whistled past the thin man's ear and embedded itself into the doorframe with a vibrating thrum. He flinched, his aim wavering for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. I lunged, closing the gap instantly. I pressed a cold finger against his throat. "Guns are dangerous," I whispered, my voice light as if discussing the weather. "They tend to go off unexpectedly. And you see, my fingers have a bit of a hair trigger too." The thin man's pupils shrunk to pinpricks. He felt something pressing against his Adam's apple, and it didn't feel like a finger. It felt like death. The bald man's face went pale. "Where the hell did you get a gun?" I didn't answer. In one fluid motion, I snatched the ion pistol from the thin man's hand and pressed the muzzle against his temple. The move was seamless, practiced, and terrifyingly fast. The room fell into a dead silence for 3 seconds. The bald man stared at me, his mind racing as he calculated the risk. Behind him, the other 3 reached for their weapons. The tension was a powder keg ready to blow. "I've changed my mind," I said, jerking my chin toward the bald leader. "Lead the way." The bald man's jaw twitched. He didn't move. "What?" I tilted my head. "Doesn't your captain want to see me? Or are you just afraid?" "Afraid of you?" He let out a harsh, forced laugh, but he didn't take a step forward. "You're a dead man walking. A piece of trash. Why would I be afraid?" "Then why are you shaking?" His face froze. I was right. He was shaking. It wasn't just fear, it was pure, unadulterated rage. Being held at bay by a sickly brat made his blood boil, but he had a hostage to worry about. "Let him go," the bald man spat through gritted teeth. "I'll take you to the captain." I shook my head. "No, this guy is coming with me. We need someone to chat with on the way." The thin man felt the cold barrel of the gun press harder against his skin. Cold sweat poured down his face. The bald man went silent for a few seconds before finally turning around. "Fine, move." The corridor was narrow and dim, lined with rusted iron plates and floor gratings that hummed with the ship's vibration. I followed the bald man, my left arm dead at my side, my right hand keeping the pistol locked onto the thin man's head. Then, the corner of my mouth quirked up. Asterisk ding. 3 hostile targets detected within game range. Forced game countdown. 3, 2, 1, asterisk. "Wait," I said, stopping in my tracks. The bald man turned back, his expression murderous. "Now what?" "You 3, I said, my gaze drifting past him to the 2 warriors behind him. "What were you just thinking about?" The 2 warriors turned pale. I didn't wait for them to answer. One of you was planning to ambush me from the left the moment I got distracted. The other was calculating if he could kill us all with an ion grenade. Their faces shifted from shock to horror. The bald man spun around, glaring at his own men. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You're lying," the warrior on the left shouted. I ignored him and looked at the bald leader. "And you?" I said. "You were thinking that once we hit the next corner, you'd use that micropistol hidden in your left sleeve to blow my head off." The bald man's pupils contracted. He instinctively touched his left sleeve. There was indeed a modified micropistol hidden there, his ultimate trump card. Not even his closest crewmates knew about it. How could this kid know? "System, force start the game," I commanded in my mind. Game mode, truth or dare. Round 1. Randomly selecting target. The bald man suddenly felt a buzzing in his brain. An invisible force seized his consciousness, and his mouth opened against his will. "What is your name?" I asked. The man's face went white. He tried to stay silent, but the words tore out of his throat. Zhou Tai. "Where did you get the gun in your sleeve?" I stole it from the captain's private armory." The two warriors behind him froze. One of them blurted out, "You stole from the captain?" Zhou Tai's face turned a deep, bruised purple. He tried to explain, but the game's rules were like invisible chains choking his vocal cords. Round 2. Target switch. The first warrior didn't even have time to process what was happening before his own mouth started moving. "How many credits do you owe the captain?" I asked. 12,000. "Why do you owe him?" I lost at gambling." Another deathly silence. Round 3. Target switch. The second warrior was locked in. "You hit a crate of modified parts last week. Who were you going to sell them to?" "To the black market dealer, Carlos." Zhou Tai spun around, his eyes practically spitting fire. "You're planning to defect?" The warrior panicked. "No, I just wanted to make some extra cash." "Enough," Zhou Tai roared, kicking the warrior in the stomach and sending him sprawling. The corridor descended into chaos. The thin man I was holding tried to break free in the confusion, but I slammed the butt of the pistol into the back of his head. He crumpled to the floor. Continue the game, I thought. The system notifications kept rolling in. Round 4 locked onto 3 crew members hiding around the corner. Round 5 locked onto the guards at the control room door. "Come on, don't be shy," I said, sitting down on the unconscious thin man and crossing my legs. One by one, everyone gets a turn. For the next 3 minutes, the hallway became a stage for the most brutal game of truth or dare in history. The 3 guys waiting to ambush us didn't just confess where the captain hid his emergency cash. They admitted to stealing a stash of high-energy crystals during last week's raid. The 2 control room guards were even worse. They admitted, in front of everyone, to having an affair with the ship's head chef. The silence that followed was heavy and bizarre. And then, everything exploded. Zhou Tai's face was so dark it looked like it was dripping ink at the mention of the captain's stolen money, and the news of the embezzled crystals sent the crew into a frenzy of accusations. The small-time bosses turned on each other instantly. As for the gossip about the guards, it worked better than I expected. The control room door was kicked open from the inside, and a massive, burly head chef stormed out. He grabbed one of the guards by the collar and started screaming insults that could be heard down the entire hall. I didn't stick around to watch. I scrambled off the floor and hugged the wall, slipping toward the escape pod bay at the end of the corridor. I took one last look back. The Red Snake Gang's ship was a total disaster zone. Curses, fists flying, and the sound of breaking glass echoed through the vents. "A bunch of losers," I muttered. I yanked open the hatch of an escape pod. It was cramped, barely enough room for 2 people. I sat in the pilot's seat and initiated the launch sequence with practiced ease. A row of red lights flickered across the dashboard. 10 seconds later, the ejection charge hit 80%. 5 seconds after that, it hit 100. Just then, the system voice chimed in my head. Congratulations to the host for completing this mandatory round. 5 wins, 0 losses. New opponent selected. Target level, Federal class, My smile froze. Federal class? Before I could even process what that meant, blue flames erupted from the back of the pod. The ejection system slammed me out of the ship's hull and tossed me into the vast, dark sea of stars. Through the small viewport, I watched the pirate ship shrink into a tiny speck. But ahead of me, A silver-white federal law enforcement vessel was slowly unfolding its 4 solar panels. Its massive cannons were pivoting, locking directly onto my position. I drifted in the silence of space for 6 grueling hours. The fuel ran out. The communications went dead. Even the life support system was down to the bare minimum. Finally, a brownish-gray transit station grew larger in my window. Its surface was scarred with impact craters and littered with the skeletons of abandoned ship frames. I was finally here. I used my right hand to slap my numb left arm. I tried to move my fingers, but there was no sensation. Winning 5 rounds in a row on that pirate ship had cost me dearly. The pirate leader's shot had nearly shattered the bone. The escape pod plummeted into the station's gravity field and was caught by a tractor beam, pulling me toward docking bay 3. I squinted through the cracked glass to size up the place. It was remote. That was my first impression. Only 3 small cargo ships were docked, and a few rusted loading bots were shuffling containers around. A man in gray overalls leaned against a wall, smoking. When he saw my pod touch down, he strolled over with a practiced, casual smile. "Looks like you ran into some trouble, brother," he said. His voice was intentionally easygoing. He glanced at the serial number on my pod, and his eyebrows jumped. "A pirate ship? Tough luck." I popped the hatch and jumped down, slapping the dust off my clothes. Ran into them near the 7-star sector. They looted my cargo and stuffed me in this junker just to get rid of me. I kept my tone natural, like I was just venting about a bad day. The man nodded and pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. "Want one? I'm Wong Pongzi. I do a bit of buying and selling around here." I took the cigarette. My eyes went straight to the calluses on the second joints of his fingers. Those weren't from manual labor. Those were from years of gripping a sidearm. "Lin Yuan," I replied. "Based on the accent, you're from Earth." Wong Pongzi smiled. "Earthlings are rare these days. Even rarer are the ones who survive a pirate encounter. You've got great luck." "It's all right," I said, putting the cigarette in my mouth without lighting it. "Is there a repair shop here? I need to get my things out of the pod." "There is, but there's a line," he said, pointing east. "Old Man Lou's place. He's always busy. If you're not in a rush, find a place to stay for a couple of days. I'll go check it out." I turned and walked away, my movements sharp and decisive. I could feel his eyes burning into the back of my head the entire way. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the station's only tavern. A glass of watered-down, low-quality beer sat in front of me. I made a show of drinking it, while every one of my senses remained dialed to the max. Wong Pongzi sat across from me. He smiled and pushed a plate forward. "The roasted spider legs here are the specialty. Try some." "Thanks." I picked one up and took a bite. It actually tasted decent, like rich crab roe. He watched me finish the leg before leaning in and lowering his voice. "Brother, I want to talk business." "What kind of business?" "I know you're broke," he said, setting down his glass. "The pirates didn't just take your cargo. They destroyed your ID card too. You're a ghost now. You can't even rent a room here without smuggling yourself in." I didn't say a word. I just waited for the hook. "I need someone to run a shipment for me. The destination isn't far, just over in the T2 sector. 1 trip, and I'll give you 50,000 credits." He held up 5 fingers. "Enough to buy yourself a brand new identity." "What's the cargo?" "Small parts. Not worth much, but there's a lot of them." His eyes looked sincere. "Don't worry, it's clean. I've been doing business here for over 10 years. I don't cross the line." I looked down at the roasted spider leg, then I suddenly laughed. "Boss Wong, do you think I'm stupid?" Wong Pongzi blinked. "What do you mean by that?" "First," I said, picking up a new skewer with my right hand, "the calluses on your hands are from a gun, not from moving crates. Second, you say you're a small-time merchant, but that watch under your sleeve is a federal military custom model. You can't buy those on the market." The smile on his face faded. And finally, I looked him dead in the eye. "We are very far from the T7 sector where the pirates hang out. A normal merchant wouldn't recognize that my pod was ejected from a pirate ship the second he saw it." The air in the tavern turned to ice. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Wong Pongzi sighed, leaned back, and drained his glass. "You really aren't an ordinary guy," he said. "Fine. Which federal department are you with?" "Commercial Inspection Bureau, 7th Investigation Division." I lied, my expression turning dead serious. We've been tracking those pirates to find their supplier. Since you managed to escape, it means you have something they want. I stared at him. The roasted spider legs were a test, weren't they? Yeah. Wang Pengzi didn't hide it anymore. Pirates don't buy dinner for their prey. But people who get kidnapped by pirates usually show extreme signs of trauma. You're too calm. It's not normal. Then why didn't you suspect I was a pirate mole? He paused, then spoke slowly. Because people who make it off those ships alive are either moles or they're monsters. I stood up slowly. My chair made a harsh, screeching sound against the floor. Investigator Wang, since you've revealed yourself, I'll be blunt. I let a small smirk play on my lips. Those pirates are definitely a problem, but I have no intention of cooperating with you. Wang Pengzi frowned. Why? Because, my gaze darkened, your testing isn't over yet, is it? His face went pale. At that exact moment, the system notification rang in my brain. Asterisk hostile intent detected. Mandatory game initiated. Truth mode activated. Basic Q&A. The questioner has one mandatory question. The opponent must answer truthfully. Asterisk. I hit the start button immediately. My turn, I said, staring into his eyes. Tell me the truth. What is your real purpose for approaching me? I stared into Wang Pengzi's eyes. The effect was instant. His gaze went hollow, and his body stiffened like a stone statue. His lips twitched, and then a few words spilled out of his mouth against his will. I am monitoring you. My pupils constricted. The blank look on Wang Pengzi's face lasted only 2 seconds before he snapped back to reality. His face turned a deathly shade of pale. He looked down at the table and realized his wine glass had shattered into jagged shards. A thin line of blood ran across his palm where the glass had sliced him. What did you do to me? He gasped. Don't get excited. I sat back down and picked up my own beer. I just asked a question. Now, it's your turn to ask one back. Wang Pengzi glared at me. The wariness and killing intent in his eyes were no longer hidden. Do you have some kind of special ability? He asked. The ultimate answer rule kicked in. I felt an invisible force clamp down on my vocal cords, forcing the truth out of my throat. Yes. I squeezed the word out through gritted teeth. Wang Pengzi's breath hitched. Suddenly, the system notification rang in my head again. Breakthrough intelligence obtained by the questioner. Counterattack round initiated. Questioner may ask one additional question. A smirk played on Wang Pengzi's lips. He knew he had caught a big fish. Do you have an organization behind you? The moment he finished the sentence, a massive headache slammed into me. It felt like 2 iron nails were being driven into my temples at the same time. My vision went dark. My right hand, gripping the table, turned white as my veins popped. No, I almost screamed the word. Wang Pengzi froze for a second. The answer caught him off guard. A man with special abilities, yet no organization to protect him? I didn't give him time to think. Ignoring the searing pain in my skull, I looked up and flashed a smile that must have looked insane. Now it's my turn. I locked onto his eyes and spoke slowly. Guess if I'm lying to you. The expression on Wang Pengzi's face shifted from suspicion to confusion, and then finally, to pure fear. He looked at me, a madman shaking from a headache but still laughing, and felt a chill go straight to his bones. Was I really alone? Was I lying to lure him in? Or was the truth itself a much bigger trap? By the time I closed the system panel, the pain had moved to the back of my head. It felt like someone was stirring my brain with a dull knife. I forced myself to stand up and down the rest of my cheap, bitter drink. The burn in my throat actually helped clear my head a little. Boss, check please. I tossed a few federal copper coins on the table and walked out of the tavern without looking back. The transit station outside was as loud as ever. Aliens and humans of all kinds moved under the flickering neon signs. In the distance, workers in battered spacesuits were unloading cargo near an old anti-gravity truck that screeched like a dying bird. I squinted and ducked into a dark alley. I leaned against the wall, pressing my hands to my temples. System, what was that punishment about? Asterisk hostile force truth used against a B-class mental power user. Penalty active. Remaining time, 23 hours, 47 minutes. Asterisk. I thought the penalty intensity was supposed to decrease over time, I muttered. Asterisk basic rules apply, but the host used psychological guidance and suggestive questioning. Penalty coefficient increased by 200% Asterisk. I grinned painfully. Next time I'll just ask if you're a pig. Maybe the penalty will be lower. Suggestion: host should stop speaking to avoid further mental energy depletion. Footsteps echoed from the depths of the alley. I stopped smiling instantly. I shifted my weight and slid my right hand to my waist. I was carrying a plasma cutter I'd swiped from the pirate ship. It wasn't exactly a weapon, but at close range, it could burn through an iron plate. The footsteps stopped. A middle-aged man in gray coveralls stood at the mouth of the alley, sipping a cup of steaming synthetic coffee. He was squinting at me. I didn't recognize his face, but his stance was wrong. His feet were slightly apart, weight on his back leg. This was a trained professional. Looking for me? I asked first. The man blinked, then smiled. Don't be nervous. I'm just a port dispatcher. A gentleman asked me to give you a message. Who? Don't know him. Fat guy in a brown coat. He said thanks for the cooperation, and he hopes to work with you again soon. The man turned and walked away, tossing his coffee cup into a trash can. I didn't chase him. My gaze turned cold. Wang Pengzi wasn't being polite. He was telling me he had my location locked down. He could watch me whenever he wanted. By sending a civilian to talk to me, he was testing my temper. If I had attacked that man, the Federation would have a legal reason to take me down. Fine. You want to play games? I exhaled sharply and headed toward the port's rental district. I needed a transport pod, and I needed it now. As I reached the rental area, a massive holographic screen in the center of the hall began broadcasting an announcement. The Interstellar Federation's 7th Fleet has officially issued wanted order number 7739. I didn't care at first. I kept scanning the flight schedules on the rental kiosks. Then the screen flickered, and my own face appeared in the top right corner. I froze. It was a photo of me scavenging in a trash heap. Next to it was a line of bold red text. Target: Lin Yuan. Male. Earth level. Approximately 26 years old. Crime: use of unauthorized, illegal mental interference devices. Danger level: A class. Mental state: unstable. High risk of unpredictable aggression. Below that, a small note read: Asterisk suspect likely lacks organizational background, but cover-up cannot be ruled out. Capture recommended using A-class threat protocols. Asterisk. My lip twitched. An A-class warrant? In the Federation system, S-class was for war criminals who destroyed planets. A-class was for high-risk targets that threatened regional security. I was a broke scavenger who couldn't even afford a real gun, and they had me listed as a regional threat. And unstable mental state? That bastard Wang Pengzi had officially labeled me a lunatic. I looked around quickly. The rental hall wasn't crowded, but a few patrol guards were already staring at the screen and whispering. I stepped back into the shadow of a pillar. System: when was this issued? Asterisk 37 minutes ago. Issued by the 7th Fleet Intelligence Department. Agent: Frederick Wong. Asterisk. 37 minutes ago. Right after my talk with the fat man, I took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline drown out the headache. I had to get out of this star system immediately. The Federation's enforcement wasn't always efficient, but an A-class warrant would lock down every civilian flight path. I knew I couldn't leave through the front door. My eyes scanned the room and landed on a small, unremarkable iron door in the corner of the hall. A crooked sign was painted on the door. It showed a small, skull-shaped spaceship. Next to it, some words were scrawled: Anonymous Rentals. Price immune. Proceed at your own risk. Smugglers only. I lowered my head and pulled my collar up. I didn't hesitate and walked straight over and pushed the heavy iron door open. Inside was a cramped, square room filled with thick, swirling smoke. An alien that looked like a bag of bones was hunched over an ancient terminal, focused on a game. I need to rent a ship, I said. The alien didn't even look up. His voice was a dry rasp as he said, Pick one. I want the fastest model you have, I told him. The kind that can skip checkpoints and fly straight to the rim sector. The alien finally raised his head. He had a pair of yellow, barrel-shaped eyes that scanned me up and down. That won't be cheap, human. I reached into my coat and pulled out an energy core the size of my fist. It was a piece of loot I'd swiped from a pirate ship. On the black market, this thing was worth thousands of Federation credits. Is this enough? I asked. The alien's pupils constricted instantly. His withered fingers snatched the gold-colored box from my hand. He held it under a flickering light, squinting. The real deal. Fine. Follow me. He pushed aside a loose metal plate on the wall, revealing a dark tunnel leading underground. I followed him without a word. At the end of the tunnel sat a grayish-black light transport ship. It was compact, with exposed power pipes and scars all over the hull. It had clearly been modified dozens of times. She's an old friend, the alien grunted. Ugly, sure, but she's fast. She can handle 7 wormhole jumps no problem, as long as you don't get locked onto by Federation radar. I did a quick sweep of the ship and nodded. Good enough. I'm leaving. Before I could finish, a piercing alarm blared from above. The alien's face went pale. Damn it. Federation. They're here. What the hell did you do? I didn't answer. I vaulted into the cockpit and slammed my hands onto the control panel. If you don't want to be framed as an accomplice, buy me 5 minutes. The alien bit his lip, cursed, and scrambled back up the stairs. I closed my eyes, fighting back the waves of pain throbbing in my skull. I had to go. Every second I stayed in this system was a second closer to death. The moment the hatch hissed shut, the entire ship shuddered. The smuggler's engine let out a deafening roar like an angry beast. I gripped the armrests as the headache hit me in needles of fire. I had to stay conscious. Hold on, I whispered through gritted teeth. Only 23 hours left. On the monitor, 3 Federation patrol ships were closing in fast. The lead ship bore the mark of the 7th Fleet. Their searchlights cut through the dark, locking onto my hull. Damn it, the smuggler's voice crackled over the comms. What did you do? An A-class warrant? That's A-class. I only took 1 energy core from you. You know now, I said, my voice eerily calm. You want to refund the payment? The comms went silent for 2 seconds. Then came a string of muffled curses. Forget it. This ship is under a fake ID anyway. Hang on tight. I'm going to show you how a pro flies in the gray prison. The ship suddenly jerked upward. The G-force slammed me into the seat. Through the viewport, the port floor shrank away at a terrifying speed. A Federation searchlight swept just 3 meters below us. They missed. Look at them scramble, the smuggler shouted with excitement. Watch me shake these. A frantic alarm cut him off. Shit. Gravity lock. They've activated the gravity lock. I felt a massive tugging force from the rear. The ship's speed plummeted. On the screen, the belly of a patrol ship opened, revealing a rotating blue device emitting visible waves of energy. It's over, the smuggler said, his voice dropping into despair. We're locked. They'll haul us back in 3 minutes. I stood up, staggering toward the console. My vision was blurry from the pain, but my eyes remained cold and steady. Push the engine to the limit, I ordered. Leave the rest to me. Leave it to you? Who do you think you? Just do it, I barked. I pressed my hand against my chest where the system interface was glowing faintly. Asterisk use skill, forced interference. Target, gravity locking device, asterisk. Asterisk command confirmed. Skill level 1. Success rate, 72.3%. Mental strain, medium, asterisk. An invisible pulse rippled out from my body. It tore through the hull and struck the device on the patrol ship with surgical precision. The alarm stopped instantly. The dragging sensation vanished. The transport ship bolted forward like a horse off its leash. Holy shit, the smuggler screamed, a mix of terror and joy. What did you do? How did that thing just? Stop talking. Jump to the coordinates now. My voice was weak. A thin trail of blood leaked from the corner of my eye. I wiped it away quickly. Right. Coordinates locked. Gray prison sector. Jumping in 3, 2, 1. The cabin filled with a high-pitched mechanical whine. The stars outside stretched into long, white lines. My stomach dropped, the typical nausea of a warp jump. When my vision cleared, the world had changed. No suns, no planets, just a vast, gray void filled with floating debris. The space here felt heavy, like it was covered in fog. Even the distant stars looked murky. We're here, the smuggler sighed. The edge of the gray prison. 2 light years ahead is Junk Bay, the biggest free port in the sector. Free port. I let out a cold laugh. You mean a criminal paradise? Same thing, he shrugged. Kid, how did you do that back there? That was a Federation gravity lock. You were inside the ship and you just disabled it? I didn't answer. I stood up and brushed the dust off my coat. Call me when we land. I turned and walked toward the cargo hold, ignoring his annoyed grumbling. The hold was packed with crates, some leaking strange, pungent fluids. I found a relatively clean corner and sat down, closing my eyes. The countdown for the system penalty was still ticking. 23 hours and 11 minutes. I had to finish my goal within this time. I needed to find old Jack. I'd heard of him. He was an information broker in the gray prison with eyes everywhere. They said he was once a high-ranking official in Federation intelligence before he defected. He could get anything, for a price. But that price was never money. The cost of exchange is unknown, I whispered, reciting the clues in my head. The ship jolted, breaking my train of thought. The smuggler's voice came through the speakers. We're here. Junk Bay Port. Kid, a word of advice before you get off. Don't ask questions. Don't stare. And definitely don't act tough. The last batch of idiots who came here got their heads fed to the dogs. I pushed the hatch open. A stench of rot and machine oil hit me square in the face. Junk Bay lived up to its name. The port was a chaotic mess of scrap metal and old ship hulls welded together. Dim lights flickered over puddles of nameless liquids. Tentacled scavengers scurried through the shadows. A few people stood scattered across the docks. Some were hauling crates. Others were leaning against walls smoking. A group of local gang members watched me, their eyes tracking me like I was a piece of fresh meat. I stepped onto the ground, my face expressionless. I hadn't even walked 10 paces before 3 shadows moved out to block my path. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man with one eye. His right arm was a mechanical prosthetic, cold and metallic. He was casually wiping fresh blood off the metal casing while he stared me down. Behind him stood 2 aliens, both over 2 meters tall. One had 3 eyes that blinked out of sync, and the other was covered in dark green scales. The one-eyed man looked me up and down. He spat on the ground, his expression sour. He told me I looked like a fresh face. I didn't say a word. I just watched him, keeping my breathing steady. My silence clearly annoyed him. He stepped closer, his voice dropping into a dangerous growl. He told me he ran this street, and that every newcomer had to pay a toll to step onto his docks. I told him straight out that I had no money. He laughed. It wasn't a friendly sound. His 2 alien thugs joined in, their laughter sounding like grinding stones and wet clicks. He told me that was fine, but then he wanted to know what I did for a living. He looked at me with a sneer and said I looked a lot like a cop. My pupils contracted. In a place like Junk Bay, being labeled law enforcement was a death sentence. If they decided I was a spy, they'd kill me on the spot. The man tightened his mechanical fist, and sparks flew from the joints. He gave me one last chance to tell him who I really was. I took a deep breath. Instead of flinching, I let a smile spread across my face. The look caught him off guard. Before he could react, a cold, mechanical voice echoed inside everyone's head. The game was starting. Mode, Dare. Participants, Chun Yuan and Smith, the leader of the Junk Bay Street Gang. The rules were simple. A specific task had to be completed. Failure meant a penalty. Smith's face turned pale. He demanded to know what I had done. I just tilted my head, my smile widening. The dare was simple. He had to shout, "I am a stupid pig," 3 times at the top of his lungs. The harbor went silent for a heartbeat. Then, Smith's mouth forced itself open. His voice boomed across the docks, loud and clear. He screamed it 3 times. When he finished, the silence returned, heavier than before. Then, the entire port erupted. Everyone watching started howling with laughter. Some people were doubling over, clutching their stomachs. Smith's face turned the color of raw liver. He stared at me, sharp claws sliding out from the fingertips of his mechanical hand. I didn't move. I kept my hands in my pockets and asked him if he still wanted that toll. I moved on, heading toward the underground casino. The entrance was hidden behind a scrap metal recycling station in the deepest part of the bay. I followed a guide who was as thin as a bamboo pole through a hallway piled with junk. He pushed open a heavy iron door, and a wall of noise and music hit me. The hall was thick with smoke and filled with every creature imaginable. Humans, scaled aliens, and massive tentacled beings were all crammed together. The air smelled like acrid synthetic alcohol and burnt wires. I pulled my hat lower and scanned the room. There were dozens of tables, but my eyes landed on a high-stakes game in the back. A woman in a black suit sat behind a green velvet table, elegantly shuffling cards. I asked the guide what the game was. He told me it was Showdown with 1,000 credit buy-in. He warned me that the lady boss was running the game herself and told me not to cry when I lost. I reached into my pocket and felt my last 3,000 credits. It was hard-earned money from working on the smuggling ship, and it wasn't nearly enough for an interstellar ticket. I sat down at the high table. The woman looked up. She looked to be in her early 30s, with sharp features and pale skin. She had a faint, knowing smile. She noted that I was a new face and asked if it was my first time. I told her the truth. I was there to make some quick cash. She chuckled, her fingers dancing over the deck. She told me I came to the right place, but warned me the table only cared about money, not feelings. I pushed all 3,000 credits forward. All in. The other players looked at me like I was an idiot. 3,000 was nothing here, barely enough to stay in a round, yet I was betting it all. The lady boss shook her head and dealt the cards. I had an ace of spades showing and a king of hearts face down. She had a 9 of diamonds. She matched my bet casually. I stared at my cards and called out to the system in my mind. I activated the dare mode and used my X-ray interference skill. My vision shifted. I could see right through her whole card. It was a jack of spades. I looked at the deck and saw the sequence of the upcoming cards. An ace of hearts, then an ace of clubs. I was going to have 3 aces. It was a guaranteed win. I pushed my last chips in and raised the bet. The lady boss narrowed her eyes. She asked if I was sure. I told her I was. She stared at me for 3 long seconds before smiling and calling the bet. When the final cards fell, I flipped my hand. 3 aces. She only had 2 pairs. The crowd gasped. I swept the chips toward me. I had just turned 3,000 into 50,000 credits. It was a good start. I stood up to leave, but her voice stopped me. I turned back to see her standing up and walking around the table. Her professional smile was still there, but her eyes were sharp and dangerous. She leaned in close and whispered that my cheating method was clever. I kept my face like stone and told her it was just luck. She got even closer, her nose almost touching mine. She told me she knew I was using mental powers. Most people wouldn't notice, but she wasn't most people. A faint blue light flickered at her fingertips. She was an awakened. She said she hated cheaters, but she was going to give me a chance. She pointed toward a private booth in the corner. She wanted 1 game. Just 1. If I won, I could keep the chips, and she'd give me a first-class interstellar ticket. If I lost, I had to leave a hand behind. My throat felt dry. The casino went quiet as everyone watched us. I took a deep breath and walked toward the booth. Inside, the light was dim. There was a small round table with 2 glasses of water. She sat across from me and told me we weren't playing cards. We were playing truth. She placed a small metal disc on the table. She explained it was her specialized tool. We would take turns holding it and asking a question. We had to tell the truth. 3 questions each. If someone lied or refused to answer, they would suffer a mental backlash. I sat there in silence. The system warned me that she had a specialized item and that dare mode was forced. The penalty for losing would be doubled. I gritted my teeth and placed my hand on the freezing metal disc. An invisible force wrapped around my arm. She went first. She stared into my eyes and asked her first question. Where are you from? The question hit me like a physical blow. My mind went blank for a split second. Before I could stop myself, my mouth opened. Earth, I said. The boss lady's eyes widened with genuine surprise. Earth, she repeated, her voice trailing off. That marginalized solar system from the backwaters of history. She looked at me with newfound interest. Interesting. An earthling with mental cheating abilities, bold enough to wander into the messiest corner of Huiyu. Now it was my turn. I took a deep breath, pushing down the anxiety. I needed to know the weight of the person sitting across from me. How many people have you killed? The smile on her face froze. The metal disc between us began to emit a high-pitched, piercing hum. Beads of sweat broke out on her forehead. 1, she muttered. Then her head jerked. No, 2. No. Her lips trembled, and her skin turned a deathly shade of white. Finally, she spat the words out through gritted teeth. 19. I felt a small wave of relief, but it didn't last. She looked up, her gaze sharper than a blade. "Second question," she said, punctuating every word. "What is your actual purpose for coming to Huiyu?" The magnetic field around the disc tightened. It felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my brain, trying to wring the truth out of me. I wanted to lie. I tried to craft a fake story, but the words forced their way out of my throat. "I'm going to the Central Star Zone," I blurted out. "I'm looking for a ship that can take me back to Earth." She let out a cold, eerie laugh. "Earth lost contact with the outside world a long time ago. You aren't going back." My heart sank. The weight of her words felt like lead in my chest. "Your turn," she said, leaning back into her chair. I clenched my teeth and asked my third question. "What is your awakening level?" Her expression shifted. The disc's humming grew deafeningly loud. Her entire body shuddered violently before she forced two words out. "Rank 6. I nearly stopped breathing. A rank 6 awakened was hiding in a dump like Huiyu? This woman was a monster. "Last question." She stood up, leaning her weight on the table and staring me down. "Do you have a secret that can keep you alive tonight?" The disc reached a fever pitch. The pressure on my brain was immense, like my soul was being ripped out through my skull. My vision blurred. Warm blood began to trickle from my nose. My voice was a raspy, trembling mess. "I have a system. It forces people to play games." The moment the words left my mouth, the metal disc exploded with a deafening bang. The force threw me backward, slamming me into the wall. I hit the ground hard, coughing up a mouthful of blood. The boss lady stood still, watching me. A flicker of shock, and then something like hunger, passed through her eyes. "A system?" she whispered, licking her lips. "You really aren't ordinary, are you?" The air in the private booth felt thick enough to suffocate me. She sat back on the sofa, her amber eyes tracking me like I was a rare treasure. Her fingers tapped a rhythmic beat on the table. "A system that forces games," she mused, her gaze turning fanatical. "How does it work?" I wiped the blood from my chin. My back felt like it was on fire from the impact. That blast nearly killed me, but her reaction was even more dangerous. I stood up and brushed the dust off my clothes. "We play by the rules," I said coldly. "You're out of questions. It's my turn." She tilted her head. "Oh, of those 19 people you killed," I said, staring her down. "Were any of them your family?" The room went dead silent. Her smile vanished. Her fingers stopped mid-tap, and her pupils shrunk. I had struck a nerve. I didn't know the whole story, but a memory fragment from the system had shown me a little girl's smile. A girl who looked exactly like her. "My sister," she whispered, her voice so low I could barely hear it. "I killed my younger sister." My heart skipped a beat. "And my mother, my father, my brother," she continued, looking up with a self-deprecating smirk. "I wiped them all out." She grabbed a bottle of liquor and took a long, messy gulp. "I was a colonel in the Federation's 7th Fleet. 17 years ago, I was ordered to hunt down a gang of interstellar pirates. During the mission, I discovered the mastermind funding them was my own father." I listened in silence. This was a secret I could use. A secret that could be a weapon. I reported it, she laughed coldly. I expected a medal. Instead, I got an execution order. The Federation elites had business ties with my father. They didn't want to touch him, so they decided I should have a fatal accident. I tried to flee with my family, but my father was so afraid of me dragging him down that he sold my location to the Federation. She spoke as if she were telling someone else's story, but her knuckles were white as she gripped the bottle. The hunters arrived. My parents tried to save their own skins by using my sister as a human shield. She died. In a fit of rage, I killed my parents and my brother. Silence filled the booth again. My mind was racing. This woman was a ticking time bomb. But if I handled her right, she would blow up my enemies instead of me. "And now?" I asked. "Now I hide here as a casino owner," she said. "The Federation warrant was dropped years ago. I have a new identity." She narrowed her eyes at me. "Why did you ask me all this?" "To cooperate," I said, leaning my hands on the table. "You have the money. I have the skills. Your casino is doing well, but you want to swallow the factories nearby, don't you? You're ambitious. And I'll clean out your competition. You pay me. Why should I trust you?" she asked. I took a single coin from my pocket and placed it on the table. "Because I'm the only one who can make you tell these secrets. Right, Colonel Liu?" Her face went pale. That was a name she hadn't heard in 17 years. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Her hand drifted toward her waist, where I could see the bulge of a holster. I didn't flinch. I took a step forward. You can kill 19 people, but you can't bury your secrets, I said, looking her straight in the eye. I made you speak once. I can do it again. Do you want to gamble on that? She stared at me, the urge to kill clashing with cold calculation in her eyes. Then she laughed. Interesting. She picked up the coin and flipped it. Lin Yuan, right? You're right. I'll take that bet. She pulled an electronic ledger from under the table. A screen flickered into the air. 1 million credits as a deposit. 2 million more when the job is done. I stared at the numbers, my heart racing, but I kept my face like stone. Deal. Who's the target? Deep Space Entertainment, at the end of the alley, she said, pointing at the screen. The boss is Mahong. He has about 30 thugs. I want him shut down within a week. A week is too long, I said, pocketing the coin and heading for the door. I paused and looked back at her. 3 days. She raised an eyebrow. Big words. It's not talk, I said. Your money just gave me all the confidence I need. I walked out of the casino, the wound on my back still stinging. For the first time, I felt a sense of power. With the system, I could take on anyone. But as I stepped onto the street, the coin in my pocket vibrated violently. A cold, mechanical voice exploded in my head. Warning. Game seed activated. Player Lin Yuan, you have triggered chain game mode. Next opponent locked. I froze. The system displayed the target's name, Liu Rian, Colonel of the 7th Fleet of the Federation, current owner of the Gray Jade Casino. Ability level, 6. Game type, Force Truth. Game countdown, 71 hours, 59 minutes, 58 seconds. I spun around and looked up at the casino window. The curtain flickered. Liu Rian was standing there, looking down at me with a cryptic smile. She was flipping a coin of her own. Suddenly, the sound of grinding metal screeched from above. I looked up just as the giant holographic screen on the casino wall exploded. Blue and white electrical arcs danced across the frame. Pedestrians screamed and scattered in every direction. 4 thugs in black combat gear rounded the corner, clutching light energy shotguns. The system voice exploded in my head. Chain game updated to team mode. Current player combat power insufficient. Temporary team recruitment authorized. Maximum team size, 4. Current vacancies, 3. I gripped the coin in my pocket and braced myself against the flow of the retreating crowd. The 4 thugs locked onto me. The bald leader grinned, revealing a mouth full of metal teeth. Kid, I heard you won the boss lady's money. I didn't answer. I scanned my surroundings. Behind a trash can to my left, a thin girl was huddled in the shadows. A broken electronic slave collar hung from her neck. To my right, a middle-aged man covered in grease peeked out from a repair shop. The system pinged again. Recruitment targets detected. Target 1, Liu Rian. Status, hostile. Target 2, unregistered slave 0217. Evaluation, level 1 electric ability. Target 3, bankrupt mechanic 442. Evaluation, mechanical engineering specialist. I took a deep breath. The thugs raised their guns. The bald leader's finger was tightening on the trigger. Wait, I shouted, throwing my hands up. I surrender. Don't shoot. The bald man froze for a second. He sneered. Giving up already? The boss lady said you were someone special. Before he could finish, I dove into a roll. I grabbed the slave girl from behind the trash can and screamed toward the alley. Mechanic, if you want your license back, get over here. The girl was shaking, but as I pulled her along, blue sparks began to dance in her palms. The mechanic hesitated for a split second, then gritted his teeth and charged out with a welding torch. The thugs didn't expect a fight. Kill them, the bald man roared. A light energy blast hit the spot where I had just been standing. The ground exploded. Shrapnel peppered my back, stinging like fire. System, apply for Geek Game. I yelled as I ran. Team mode activated. Game mode, Truth or Dare hybrid. Formulate tactics within 60 seconds. I have a plan. Liu Rian's voice crackled through my communicator, dripping with mockery. Have the little slave use Truth to find a weakness. Then have the mechanic use Dare to trigger the penalty. My pupils shrank. You can hear the system prompts? I can't hear them, and I can see your entire activity log, she said, sounding genuinely amused. Lin Yuan, did you think I didn't know you were using me? I'm curious to see how you survive this. There was no time to argue. A pile of scrap blocked our path. The four thugs were closing in, forming a semicircle. The bald man's laugh grew louder. Nowhere left to run, kid. I turned to the girl. Use your electricity. Hit the bald one. Not too hard, just enough to numb him. She bit her lip, her eyes red. I've only done it a few times. Do it now, or we all die, I snapped. She took a breath and thrust her hand out. A thin arc of blue lightning hissed through the air and struck the bald man's chest. It only left a small scorch mark on his armor, but it made his body jerk. Forced truth triggered, the system announced. Target 1 plays truth. Question, what is your greatest fear? The bald man's face went pale. He tried to speak, but his lips moved uncontrollably. A voice that didn't sound like his own squeezed out. I'm afraid my wife will find out I pawned the bracelet she gave me. The other thugs froze. The alley went silent for 2 seconds. I almost laughed, but I didn't waste the opening. Mechanic, now. The mechanic aimed his torch at a discarded fuel pipe beneath the leader's feet. The high-temperature flame melted the metal instantly. Residual fluid sprayed out, soaking the bald man. Forced dare triggered. Target 1 plays dare. Task, attack the teammate closest to you. Before the leader could process what was happening, his body swung around. He buried a fist into the face of the tall thug behind him. The man flew backward, his gun firing blindly as he fell. The shot hit the third thug in the knee. He went down screaming. The fourth thug panicked, aiming his weapon at his own leader. Don't shoot. It's me. The bald man screamed, but it was too late. The alley erupted in a chaotic crossfire of blue light. I grabbed the girl and the mechanic, hugging the wall as we sprinted away. Behind us, the sounds of explosions and screams faded into the distance. We ran for 3 blocks before I collapsed against a wall, gasping for air. My ribs burned, and a stray blast had grazed me, leaving a deep, bloody gash. The slave girl knelt beside me, using a tiny, controlled current to cauterize the wound. The mechanic leaned against the opposite wall, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold his torch. Lu Rian's laughter came through the comms. Congratulations on your first team win. But the next 70 hours are going to be very interesting. I looked up. In the distance, the top floor of the casino was still lit. She was standing there, raising a glass of red wine toward me. Team mission progress, 35%. Teammate favorability, slave plus 30, mechanic plus 20. Warning, enemy combat power will continue to increase during the chain game. I wiped the blood from my face and pulled the coin from my pocket. I flicked it toward the distant window. It arched through the air and clipped the frame with a sharp clink. The light in her window went dark. 3 hours later, I stood in the 3rd basement level of the Gray Jade Casino. Spotlights hit a massive black gambling table. The room was packed with scavengers, masked mercenaries, and cyborgs. Damn, the kid actually showed up, someone whispered. I heard he took out the bald guy's crew. So what? Lord Zero is presiding over the Gambling King tournament this year. He's dead meat. I ignored them and walked to the registration desk. A bunny girl attendant scanned my ID chip with a mechanical eye. Red text flashed on her screen. Identity unverified. No eligibility to compete, she said with a plastic smile. I'm sorry, sir. Participants need legal identification or... He pointed to a holographic sign nearby. The entry fee was 100,000 interstellar credits, or an equivalent collateral. I reached up and unhooked the silver coin hanging around my neck. I tossed it onto the counter with a heavy metallic thud. The bunny girl attendant caught it, and her pupils instantly contracted. She frantically typed into her console, her face shifting through a dozen different expressions. Finally, she squeezed out a smile that looked more painful than crying. Sir, please enter, she stammered. I grabbed the coin and walked into the player's tunnel without looking back. Behind me, a commotion broke out. People were whispering, wondering what my connection was to the boss lady, since that coin was her personal token. The crowd suddenly parted. I turned my head and saw a 2-meter-tall, blue-skinned alien walking from the other end of the tunnel. He wore a deep purple formal suit. 2 antennae grew from his head, swaying gently with every step as if they were sensing the air. 6 bodyguards followed him, all of them high-end cyborgs with pulse guns clipped to their waists. This was Lord Zero, the undisputed gambling king of the gray jade underworld. They said he could read a person's mind just by looking at them. I squinted as my system panel flashed to life. Target detected, 0. Race, telepathic. Level, unknown. Warning, target can sense mental fluctuations. Recommendation, lower cognitive activity during the game. I cursed internally. Lower my cognitive activity? My brain was currently redlining, calculating every possible move. There was no way to just turn it off. Players, take your seats, the announcer's voice boomed. 20 players sat down. I found myself sitting directly across from Zero. His antennae twitched. He stared at me for 3 seconds before he spoke. You aren't here for the money, he said. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face like stone. Oh, your heartbeat is steady, Zero smiled, revealing a row of sharp teeth. But your mental ripples tell me you're planning something. Interesting. I haven't had a worthy opponent in a long time. I didn't answer. I just placed my silver coin on the table. The game started fast. The first round was blackjack. The dealer gave me a 16. The dealer's face-up card was an ace. Statistically, I should have hit, but I didn't rely on probability. I activated the system. Target, dealer. Skill, truth. Game start. The dealer's mind was suppressed by the system rules. He had to answer one question. I asked him in my mind, what is the next card? The dealer's eyes went vacant. His mouth opened uncontrollably. No whole king, he muttered. I stayed. The dealer flipped his whole card, a 12. He had to hit. He pulled the top card from the deck. It was the king. He busted. The room erupted. People wondered if it was luck, but I saw Zero's antennae give a sharp jerk. In the second round of Showdown, I used the system to win 2 more consecutive games. My score shot to the top of the leaderboard. The other players were sweating now, looking at me with fear. By the third round, I had correctly guessed the dice totals 3 times in a row. I was leading by a mile. Zero hadn't made a single move yet. He just watched me with a faint, unreadable smile. Final round, the announcer shouted, knocking on the table. Winner takes all. Current rankings. Lin Yuan is first, Lord Zero is second. If Lord Zero cannot overtake him now, the championship goes to Lin Yuan. Zero finally stood up. He pushed every single one of his chips into the center. All in. The room went silent. I stared at his antennae and saw them vibrating at a frantic frequency. The system warned me that his mental probe intensity was spiking. I didn't have time to overthink. I triggered my last dare card. Target, 0. Skill dare. Game start. Zero was forced to complete a challenge. In the next round of roulette, you cannot bet on a number higher than 18. Zero's body stiffened for a split second. His antennae stopped vibrating. He looked down at the wheel and suddenly laughed. An interesting game. He pushed his chips onto the number 18. My heart sank. 18 was the exact limit of the system's restriction. If he was being suppressed, he should have picked something safer. Why 18? Unless. Are you trying to calculate me? Zero suddenly looked up, staring straight into my eyes. The question was so sudden my brain couldn't process it. A bolt of electricity surged through my body. I froze. Warning, counterattack successful. Penalty active, mental paralysis. Duration, 3 seconds. 3 seconds. On a gambling table, that was an eternity. My eyes wouldn't move. My breath stopped. I was a statue. Zero stood up, walked around the table, and leaned into my ear. Your mental strength is great, he whispered. But you are too young. He patted my shoulder gently. You lose. The paralysis began to fade, but it was too late. The roulette wheel was already slowing down. Zero had bet on 18. I had bet on 21 just a second before the paralysis hit. The pointer clicked slower and slower, finally landing right on 18. The crowd went wild. The announcer screamed Zero's name. I stood there, my fingers trembling. Not because I lost, but because a new system warning appeared. Chain game penalty triggered. New mission. Defeat Zero's mental probe and seize his mental shield component. Failure penalty. Permanent loss of system access. Countdown, 72 hours. I looked up. Zero was watching me, his antennae swaying playfully. He mouthed the words, "I'll be waiting." Then he turned and walked away. The cheers hadn't even died down before a strange sensation washed over me. It felt like an ice pick was being driven into the back of my head, sliding down my spine. I tried to move, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. This wasn't just mental pressure. Zero had done something. When the system told me my mental defenses were breached, I had already lost control of my body. The sounds of the casino became muffled, like I was underwater. No one noticed I was frozen, but Zero noticed. He walked back toward me, his pace light and rhythmic, like a tightrope walker. Every step seemed to sync with my accelerating heartbeat. "Move," I screamed in my head. My body didn't budge. Zero stopped 3 meters away. A clear, mocking smile spread across his blue face. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin, silver needle about 10 centimeters long. It was sharp and reflected the cold overhead lights. My pupils shrunk. I knew what that was. In the gray jade underworld, a silver nerve cracker was the trademark of a professional assassin. If that needle touched my skin for even a fraction of a second, it would sever my central nervous system. This was a casino, and while the rules forbade public murder, no one cared about a grudge match that ended in a freak accident. Zero raised the silver needle. He aimed it directly at my carotid artery. "Goodbye," he mouthed silently. The needle lunged downward. In that split second, my mind went blank, save for one desperate thought. System force start. The system terminal embedded under my skin ignited like a wildfire. A violent, searing heat exploded from my chest, surging into my limbs. The paralysis that held me shattered like glass. My body jerked. My right leg stepped forward in a pure reflex, and the silver needle grazed my collarbone. It tore through my collar, leaving a thin, stinging red line of blood. Zero's expression shifted, turning into something cold and hard. But I wasn't playing by the rules anymore. I grinned. Then I started to laugh. I laughed loud and long, like a lunatic who had just broken out of an asylum. The entire casino floor went dead silent. Every eye turned toward me. "I almost forgot," I said, still laughing as I looked up at the ceiling as if talking to someone invisible. "You won that last round of roulette, didn't you?" Zero narrowed his eyes, remaining silent. "Then it's your turn for a penalty." The system panel flashed at the edge of my vision. Asterisk dare initiated. Target, Zero Casa. Mission, fall down. The more pathetic, the better. Zero's face twisted. His antennae twitched violently as he tried to back away, but his body refused to listen. It was as if something had tripped his blue legs. His knees buckled, and he lunged forward. Thud. It was a dull, heavy sound. Zero's face slammed hard against the edge of the gambling table. He lost his balance completely, crashing to the floor with his limbs sprawling in every direction. His legs kicked weakly in the air. He looked like a flipped-over mosquito, or a turtle stuck on its back. Total silence. Everyone stared at the great gambler face down on the floor. A nearby bunny girl, who had been busy exchanging chips, dropped a silver coin. The ting of it hitting the floor was deafeningly clear. Zero slowly lifted his head. His blue skin had turned a deep, bruised purple. Veins bulged on his forehead, and his antennae stood straight up like glowing red iron bars. You dare play me?" he hissed through gritted teeth. I stood over him, looking down with a bright, mocking smile. "Got a problem?" I crouched so I was eye level with him. "Isn't your mind reading supposed to be amazing? Go on, then. Guess what I'm going to do next." Zero stared into my eyes, his antennae trembling frantically. 3 seconds passed. His face grew even paler. "You can't read it, can you?" I asked. I stood up and brushed the dust off my pants. I looked around the room and spread my arms wide. "Everyone, take a good look." I pointed at Zero on the floor, my voice booming like a circus ringmaster. This great gambler just tried to stab me with a needle. And the result? He tripped over his own feet and ate dirt. TSK, TSK. If this is the level of a gambler king, I think I could do his job better than him. The room erupted. People started whistling and slamming tables. A few drunken scavengers laughed so hard they couldn't stand up straight. In the underground world of gray jade, people had seen everything, but watching a high and mighty gambler king turn into a clumsy turtle was a rare treat. Zero climbed to his feet. He brushed himself off, his face returning to a mask of calm, but his eyes betrayed him. There was a killing intent there, cold, heavy, and sharp as a blade. I had seen that look before on the junk planet. It was the look a starving drifter gave his prey. I stopped smiling. I looked him dead in the eye. I know the rules of Grey Jade. There are many. But I also know the most important one: no public executions. If you really want to kill me, find a quiet place. I'll be waiting. Zero's antennae twitched, weighing my words. You'll regret this, he said, his voice a low growl. We'll see about that, I shrugged. But just so you know, I recorded that fall. Tomorrow, I'm uploading it to the Grey Jade dark web. I've already got the title, Gambler King Zero's Epic Faceplant. What do you think? Zero's face finally broke. He took a deep breath, turned, and walked away. But at the entrance to the tunnel, he stopped and looked back at me. 72 hours, he said. You'll come looking for me. Then he vanished into the shadows. I stood there, watching the spot where he disappeared, and slowly let my smile fade. The noise of the casino rushed back in, but I didn't hear a word of it. I was staring at my system panel. Chain mission in progress. Countdown, 71 hours, 38 minutes. Current objective, defeat Zero Casa. Seize the mental shield component. I clenched my fist, then forced it to relax. The bunny girl walked over cautiously. Mr. Chun, she whispered. How did you actually make Zero fall? He slipped on a banana peel, I said dismissively. I headed for the exit without looking back. Behind me, the casino was a boiling pot of rumors. People were already dissecting what happened, wondering who this new madman was. Within half an hour, the word had spread through the Grey Jade underworld. There was a new player in town who gambled with his life, whose mind was a total blank to telepaths, and who had made a fool out of Zero. And somehow, the crazy bastard was still breathing. The air in the back alley behind the casino smelled like burnt neon tubes. I leaned against the wall, my fingers tracing the shallow scratch on my collarbone. The sting of the nerve cracker had faded, but the memory was as fresh as a scar. I had won the gamble. Now, it was time to collect. I walked into the exchange hall beneath the casino. A balding Casa alien sat behind the counter, his eyes glowing a faint purple as he flipped through an ID chip. This is yours, he said, sliding the chip across the counter. Legal citizenship. Full access to Grey Jade. I caught the chip. It felt cold against my skin. And the ship. The clerk looked up, the purple light reflecting off his pitted face. Level 5, Dock 3. A Rec-class light transport. Engines are modified, and it has a stealth coating. He paused, lowering his voice. The previous owner died 2 weeks ago. No one claimed it. I didn't bite. I just pocketed the chip. Keys. He tossed a magnetic key from a drawer. I caught it and walked away. As the elevator descended, I felt eyes on me. When the doors opened at the docks, I saw a girl. She was huddled in a corner, her hair a tangled mess. She was barefoot, with a faded red string tied around her wrist. She looked up, revealing a dirty face and a pair of clear, vivid green eyes. You? Her voice was tiny. Are you the one who beat Zero? I didn't stop. I walked straight toward Dock 3. They say you're a madman, she said, following me. Her bare feet slapped against the cold metal floor. I want to go with you. I stopped and turned to look at her. Give me a reason. She bit her lip for a long time. My name is Xiaolu. My master is dead. No one wants me. Zero's people are coming to process me tomorrow. Your master was the previous owner of the ship? Xiaolu nodded. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I stared at her for 3 seconds. Keep up, I said. She froze, then broke into a small run to catch up. In Dock 3, a gray-painted ship sat on the platform. It had a streamlined hull and a cockpit glass that reflected the dim, cold lights of the hangar. Beneath the wings, I could see the heavy, modified engine nozzles. This was my way out. I walked around the hull of the ship, inspecting my new prize. Near the stern, I spotted an old man in oil-stained coveralls. He was hunched over, busy welding something on the fuselage. Who are you? I asked. The old man pushed up his welding mask, revealing a face deeply etched with wrinkles. He was missing a front tooth, which gave his grin a bit of a comical look. Just call me Old Bao, he said. New owners like you, who pick up ships for a bargain, always need someone who actually knows how they work. You know this ship? Old Bao patted the hull with pride. This is the meteor. I watched her get built from the blueprints up. The previous owner owed me 800 credits and kicked the bucket before paying. I stayed behind because I wanted to wait for a reliable new master. I stared at him for a long moment, then I laughed. One of you wants a home, the other wants a chance, I said, holding up 3 fingers. Fine, I'll give you both a shot, but I have 3 rules. First, don't go looking for trouble. Second, if trouble finds us, don't be afraid of it. Third, Xiao Lu and Old Bao both leaned in, listening intently. If someone comes knocking, I finished, we make sure they learn what it feels like to be played until they cry. Old Bao grinned wide. Spoken like a man. Xiao Lu lowered her head and whispered, I can cook and clean. Get on board. I commanded, leading the way into the cabin. The interior of the meteor was much roomier than it looked from the outside. It had a small living area, a kitchen, and 4 sleeping berths. In the cockpit, 2 rows of seats faced a dashboard covered in Casa Star script that I couldn't read. Old Bao stepped in and tapped a few buttons. The text shifted into the common tongue. That was much better. I sat in the pilot's seat and fired up the engines. A low roar vibrated through the floorboards. System self-check complete, Old Bao said, scanning the data. Fuel is plenty. Engines are normal. Stealth coding is at 29% efficiency. I nodded and looked at the comms panel. What now? Xiao Lu asked tentatively. Are we going to find Zero? I shook my head. He'll find us. First, we get out of the gray zone. I pulled the control lever. The ship rose slowly, detaching from the dock platform. Outside the viewport, the neon lights of the gray zone faded. The massive city built on this desert planet shrank until it was just a single lonely spark in the dark night. Destination? Old Bao asked. Toward the 2nd star system, I said. Find us a place where no one is around. Xiao Lu brought a pot of hot water and set it on the rack beside my seat. I glanced at it, but didn't say anything. Outside, the stars were flickering. As I felt the slight vibration of the seat, a strange feeling washed over me. I had my own ship now. I had my own people. But I also had a 72-hour countdown. In the corner of my vision, the mission prompt flashed. Defeat Zero Casa. Seize the mind shield component. Time remaining, 71 hours and 2 minutes. Suddenly, the system notification chimed in my head. A transparent window appeared that only I could see. Player notification. Next game opponent matched. Target, Federation Special Forces, A, Player Squad. Forced game type, Truth or Dare. Countdown, 24 hours until forced interaction range. My fingers froze in midair. The A players. They were the Federation's elite task force for abnormal incidents. Every member was a monster handpicked from across the galaxy, possessing either special abilities or terrifying raw strength. People called them the Federation's ultimate weapon. If they were deployed, it usually meant the target was already dead. What's wrong? Old Bao noticed my face go pale. I pulled my gaze back and forced a relaxed smile onto my face. Nothing. I just realized this game is getting a lot bigger than I imagined. Xiao Lu brought out a bowl of hot soup and set it on the table. She saw my expression and stayed quiet. I watched the stars streak past, my mind racing. A squad of A players. They had me locked. I had 24 hours. I let go of the controls and turned to the 2 of them. Listen up. From now on, things are going to get a little abnormal. I wore a smile that was hard to read. If I say anything strange or do anything weird, you don't need to help me, and you don't need to stop me. Old Bao frowned. Why? I stood up and walked to the cabin door. I looked back, my eyes calm but dangerous. Because the people we're about to deal with only listen to reason when it comes from a madman. The door hissed shut behind me. 24 hours later, the hunt began. On the monitor, 6 silhouettes emerged from the southeast tunnel of the gray zone. I leaned back in my seat, tapping the armrest. My pupils contracted. I couldn't see the details of their gear, but their movements were perfect. These weren't mercenaries. Old Bao, shut down all active scanning equipment, I said. What? Old Bao gasped. That'll turn us blind. If they tracked us this far, they can detect passive signals. Active scanning just gives them a target to shoot at. My voice was steady. Xiao Lu, dim the corridor lights by a third. Xiao Lu's hands were shaking, but she hit the switches. As the lights faded from bright white to a dim amber, the 6 figures on the screen paused for a split second. The leader looked up. The camera caught his face. He had short silver hair and a small crystal embedded in his left temple that glowed with a faint blue light. My heart sank. A cyborg? Or a neural enhancement model? I'd seen scrap versions of those in junk markets. Even the civilian models boosted reaction speeds by 40%. Military grade would be terrifying. Mr. Lin Yuan. A voice suddenly boomed over the ship's external broadcast. It was so clear it sounded like he was standing in the cockpit. Xiaolu jumped. Old Bao trembled. "Don't panic," I whispered. I pressed the mic button. "Who's calling?" I kept my tone lazy, like I'd just woken up. "Federation, a player squad, 7th group. Captain Sora," the voice replied with a metallic edge. "We need your cooperation for a routine inspection." I didn't answer him. I looked at Old Bao. He mouthed the words, "Intelligence Bureau." These people were the real deal. I keyed the mic again. "Routine inspection? This ship is registered as civilian salvage. You've got the wrong guy." "We don't," Sora replied instantly. "We've seen the recordings of your matches. We're very interested in you." My eyes darkened. They had the casino footage. To get that so fast, they either had high-level clearance or the local gangs were in their pocket. "What's there to see?" I scoffed. "I just beat a few weaklings." Sora didn't bite. "I suggest you open the hatch. It will save us all a lot of trouble." "And if I don't?" Mr. Lin Yuan, his voice was deathly calm. "We brought a C-class inhibition matrix. We can lock down this ship's entire power system in 15 minutes. You aren't going anywhere." The air in the cockpit turned cold. The game had truly begun. Old Bao gritted his teeth, the sound of grinding bone audible in the quiet cockpit. "A C-class inhibition matrix," he whispered, his voice trembling. "That's military grade. It covers a 3-kilometer radius. If he's telling the truth, he can turn this entire ship into a useless hunk of scrap metal." Xiaolu clenched her fists, her eyes darting toward me. I kept my face blank, wearing a mask of casual indifference. But inside, my mind was racing. A direct confrontation was suicide. They had the numbers, the gear, and cybernetic soldiers. But Sora said he wanted me alive. That meant they wouldn't blow the ship. Not yet. That was my opening. I suddenly grinned and stood up, stretching my arms over my head like I'd just finished a nap. "Old Bao, do me a favor." I pulled 2 rings from my pocket and tossed them to him. They were gadgets I'd won back at the casino, one designed to emit a blinding flash, the other a high-frequency sonic burst. Old Bao scrambled to catch them. "What are you doing?" I walked over to the hatch and patted the cold metal. When I say open the door, don't actually do it. Just simulate a door-opening failure on the console. Send out a false error signal. Old Bao's eyes widened. "What's the plan, Lin Yuan?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen, looking at the woman with the silver-gray hair. "Sora." "A player squad, huh? If you want to see a madman, I'll give you one." I hit the mic button. "Captain Sora, right? Look, I'm in a pretty foul mood. I just lost a lot of money at the casino, and I'm looking for someone to help me kill the boredom." There was a half-second pause on the other end. "What is that supposed to mean? You want to inspect the ship?" I let my voice drop into a playful, arrogant drawl. "Fine, I'll let you. But," I paused, letting the silence hang, "you have to play a game with me first." On the monitor, the 5 soldiers behind Sora raised their rifles in unison. Sora held up a hand, signaling them to stand down. "Play what? Truth or dare?" I said, my voice dripping with mock cheer. "Simple rules. You send one person up. I'll pick the questions or the tasks. If you lose, you answer or you perform. Simple, right?" Old Bao was speechless. Xiao Lu turned pale. Playing games with a Special Forces unit? It was insanity. But I remained as still as a frozen pond. "You saw the recordings, didn't you?" I challenged. "So come find out for yourself if I'm the real deal or not." Sora was silent for a few seconds. Then, she smiled. It was a cold, razor-sharp expression. "Interesting. Fine. Let's play." She unbuckled her tactical pack, tossed it to her team, and began walking toward the ship alone. I turned to Old Bao and winked. "Remember, don't actually open that door." As the words left my lips, my vision flared. Golden text erupted across my interface. Asterisk forced lure initiated. Game ready. Asterisk. Asterisk opponent, Sora Vista. Cyborg. Neural enhancement level, 7. Mode, truth. Penalty reflection probability, 72%. Asterisk. My breath hitched at that 72%. The last time I saw a number that high, a neural disruptor nearly turned my brain to mush. This was even more dangerous. The hatch hissed as the error signal triggered, but I was already leaning against the frame, hands in my pockets, looking like a street thug. I tilted my head at Sora. Hey, big shot. Want to go around? Sora stopped. Her eyes had a metallic sheen, scanning me from head to toe like a digital sensor. 3 seconds later, her lips curled into a smirk. Are you serious? Do I look like I'm joking? I yawned. You're about to dismantle my ship anyway. Might as well have some fun. Standing around is exhausting. Before I could finish, the system interface turned blood red. Asterisk forced game triggered. Current turn, Lin Yuan. Countdown 3, 2, 1, asterisk. Sora's expression shifted instantly. She tried to step back, her hand flying to her waist, but an invisible force locked onto her neural circuits. I heard her cybernetic skeleton groan, a low hum of metal fighting against an unseen shackle. Don't be nervous. I laughed, scratching the back of my head. The game has already started. I'm a man of honor. I'll let you get a feel for it first. I blinked, my voice turning airy and light. My question is simple. What are the coordinates for the secret base in the 7th district? Sora's pupils shrunk. Her jaw clamped shut, her muscles bulging as she fought the compulsion. But this wasn't a physical attack. It bypassed her logic and slammed directly into her nervous system, prying her mouth open. Nebula, coordinates, -7, 449. Alpha quadrant. Every word sounded like it was being dragged through gravel. Her face turned a deep, angry crimson. She glared at me, her neck muscles taut as steel cables. Under the system's rules, she had no choice. My turn, she rasped. Her voice sounded like it was rising from the depths of hell. I tightened up. 72% reflection chance. This was going to hurt. I kept my casual posture, even scratching my neck, trying to hide the tension. Go ahead. Sora took a deep breath. She practically screamed the question. Lin Yuan, are you afraid of dying? The interface shuddered. Opponent counter question. Penalty reflection check. Passed. A massive jolt of electricity surged from the base of my skull down to my tailbone. It wasn't real current, but it felt like white-hot needles stitching through my nerves. My forehead broke into a cold sweat. I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white. My old injuries flared up. The scar on my ribs felt like it was being branded with a hot iron. But I smiled. I bared my teeth in a jagged grin. Me? Who isn't afraid of dying? I'm terrified of pain. I shake when I get a flu shot. The agony was still ripping through me, but my laughter grew louder, more reckless. I bent over, clutching my knees, my shoulders shaking with mirth. But being afraid is what makes it fun, right? A game without fear is just boring. Sora froze. She stared at me, a man shaking with pain, yet laughing like a maniac. There was no fear in my eyes, only a feverish, manic light. I looked like a gambler who had just seen the winning card. She was shaken. She had seen people who weren't afraid to die, and people who pretended to be brave. But she had never seen someone endure a system penalty and laugh through the torture. Her internal sensors were likely screaming that my pain levels were off the charts, yet my reaction was pure excitement. I took a shaky breath, forcing the pain down into a dark corner of my mind. Round's over. My turn again, right? I tilted my head and gave her a brilliant, terrifying smile. One more question. With your clearance level, you must know the final objective of this fleet's operation, don't you? Sora's face went pale. She could feel it. The system was gathering its strength again, preparing for the next forced truth. He didn't answer me immediately. Instead, his eyes darted toward the dark corridor behind me. Over there, Old Ba was crouching behind the control console, his fingers trembling as they hovered over a bright red button. Xiaolu's face was deathly pale. Her lips quivered as she mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I understood them perfectly. My heart skipped a beat. She was saying the ship was set to self-destruct in 30 seconds. The Red Snake Gang's pursuers were closing in, and Old Ba's finger was already pressing down. 20 seconds left. My mind raced through the possibilities. If this ship blew, the blast radius would turn every piece of junk for miles into ash. But if we jumped ship now, Sora and her mercenaries were waiting right outside the door. Stepping out meant catching a hail of bullets. All right, let's call it a day, I said, a sudden grin spreading across my face. I reached out toward Sora. How about a handshake before I go? We did play around together, after all. Sora stared at me, her eyes filled with suspicion and disgust. She didn't take my hand. Instead, she took a half step back. She barked a cold order, and her mercenaries instantly retreated. Their footsteps were hurried but disciplined. Sora gave me one last look, a look that promised I wouldn't get away, before vanishing into the depths of the corridor. I didn't have time to dwell on her threat. I spun around and bolted for the cockpit. Xiao Lu had already jumped to the console, her fingers flying across the keys. 10 seconds. Old Ba, stop pressing that damn button. Xiao Lu screamed. Old Ba's hand snapped back as if he'd been electrocuted, and he leaped up in terror. I dove into the co-pilot's seat. I didn't even bother with the seatbelt. I grabbed the control stick, slammed the rear engines to full throttle, and diverted all power to the shields. 3 seconds later, the tail of this junker spat out 2 plumes of distorted blue flame. The hull groaned and shuddered violently, feeling like it might fall apart at any moment. I gripped the stick with white knuckles, my eyes locked on the debris field ahead. 5 seconds. Xiao Lu's voice cracked. The ship lurched forward with a bone-jarring kick. I yanked the stick hard to the right, narrowly scraping past a massive piece of metal wreckage. Then, the shockwave hit. It felt like a giant had kicked the back of the ship. Alarms wailed in a deafening chorus. My head slammed back against the seat, and for a moment, the world went black. When my vision cleared, I looked back. On the asteroid we had just left, a blinding fireball was expanding, swallowing everything in rolling clouds of debris and smoke. Sora's mercenary ship was visible at the edge of the blast, desperately accelerating to escape the flames. They're not dead, I muttered. It wasn't a guess, it was a calculation. A commander like Sora wouldn't order a retreat without timing her exit perfectly. Where do we go now? Xiao Lu asked, her voice still shaking. I didn't answer right away. I checked our energy reserves and shield status, then pulled up the star map. My eyes landed on Gray Prison, a massive interstellar transit station known for chaos and lawlessness. It was a haven for outlaws, information brokers, and black market traders. It was perfect. To Gray Prison, I decided. Old Ba's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Are you insane? That place is more dangerous than here. Sora will definitely have blockades on the way. She will, I grinned. But she won't expect what I'm about to do. I opened the communication system and began scanning the public frequencies of Gray Prison. I searched for a casino owner named 8 Fingers, an old gambler I'd sold intel to a few times in the past. I need to use your network, I said, cutting straight to the chase when the connection clicked through. A raspy, piercing laugh came from the other end. Kid, my network isn't cheap. What are you paying with? A piece of news. I lowered my voice. The kind that will keep your casino full for 3 days straight. 8 Fingers went silent for a few seconds. What news? I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I turned to Xiao Lu. How many factions are active in Gray Prison right now? She didn't understand my plan, but she did as she was told. A few minutes later, she handed me a list. Gray Prison currently hosted 3 pirate fleets, 2 merchant guild outposts, and a mysterious investigation team rumored to be from a lower plane power. That's enough, I laughed. I patched back into 8 Fingers' network and spoke slowly into the transmitter. I found something on the junk planet. A divine artifact, an evolution tool for the system. Want to know where it is? Trade me some intel. The laughter on the other end stopped instantly. It was replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. I knew the hook was set. From this moment on, every desperate soul in Gray Prison would be like a shark smelling blood. They would all come for me. Xiao Lu's face was white. You're baiting them here? Sora won't let us go, and those other players will find us eventually. Exactly, I said. Instead of waiting for them to pick us off one by one, why not bring everyone together and play a bigger game? Old Boss swallowed hard. Did you actually find a divine artifact? I looked at him, but said nothing. Of course I hadn't. The thing didn't even exist. But in this world, a lie doesn't need evidence. It only needs people to believe it. A few hours later, I saw them. A crowd was gathering, one-eyed pirates lugging energy cannons, hooded intel brokers, and several metallic figures that were clearly cyborgs from the lower planes. Every eye was fixed on me. I took a deep breath and put on that same unreadable, reckless smile. I stepped toward the crowd. But as I did, I noticed a figure in a deep gray cloak quietly backing into the shadows. On that person's finger was a dull gold ring engraved with a haunting symbol, a blood-red eye, the mark of an other player. The air in the abandoned mining zone of gray prison reeked of sulfur. The cracked metal plates beneath my boots creaked with every step. I stood at the edge of a collapsed mine shaft, clutching a palm-sized black device. It was a signal simulator Xiao Lu had cobbled together on the ship. It was designed to mimic the frequency of a system-generated quest. "You sure this thing can fool their scanners?" Old Ba asked from behind me. He was a nervous wreck. I didn't look back. I just toyed with the device, my eyes shimmering with a manic light. Let them try to figure it out. This frequency is an unsolvable encryption level to them. They've never seen it, but their sensors will tell them it's something extraordinary. I tossed the device into the pit. It clattered down into the darkness, its faint light disappearing. Let them fight over it. Xiao Lu was crouching nearby, trembling. But those mercenaries have heavy gear. We don't even have proper weapons. Who says we don't? I pulled a small trigger detonator from my coat and shook it gently. The energy conduits under this mine haven't been drained yet. If I blow the core nodes, we won't make it out either. She gasped. I stared at her, my expression suddenly calm. Who said we were staying to watch the fireworks? For hours after I leaked the news, the first streaks of descending ships appeared in the sky above the gray prison mines. The first to arrive was a pack of one-eyed pirates. Their leader was a brute with half an ear missing, carrying a modified energy cannon. They landed at the edge of the sector and, without a word, began drilling into the earth. The second ship touched down at the western entrance of the mining area. 5 figures leaped out, clad in black robes. They were intelligence brokers. One of them flicked a wrist, releasing 3 miniature reconnaissance drones that zipped into the dark tunnels. I watched as the pirate leader saw them. He let out a primal roar, realizing they were being beaten to the punch. He waved his team forward, charging the pit. The roar of energy cannons shattered the silence. Explosions lit up the sky, turning the horizon a bruised, bloody red. The brokers didn't flinch. Dark red beams shot from their hands, punching clean holes through the chests of 2 pirates. Within 3 minutes, the area was a chaotic war zone. I was crouched a kilometer away behind a pile of discarded ore. I watched the flashes of light and the silhouettes of men dying through the optical lens Xiao Lu had set up. It was beautiful in a way. "They're actually doing it," I whispered. My voice was calm, like I was critiquing a theater performance. Old Ba was huddled beside me. His face had gone several shades past pale. "You said there would only be small factions. Look at those insignias. That's the joyful mercenary corps and Rizhui intelligence. Neither of them are pushovers, Lin Yuan." I shrugged. "Plans change. They're all here to kill me anyway. Let them burn through their ammo first." Just as the words left my lips, the air changed. A different kind of energy ripple washed over the mining area. It was cold. It felt heavy, vibrating with a mechanical, calculated rhythm. My pupils shrank. At the eastern entrance, a deep gray shield expanded silently. Several figures stepped out from the shimmering wall. They wore identical ash-gray combat suits and expressionless masks. The leader wore a dull gold ring on his finger. On it sat a blood-red eye symbol that caught the light of the fires. "Players," I hissed, the word grinding between my teeth. "This isn't right." Old Ba grabbed my arm, his grip shaking. "How? They're supposed to be on the harvesting battlefields of the 3rd sector." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I watched the 7-man squad stop in their tracks. The captain raised his arm and aimed his palm at the brawling pirates and brokers. He simply closed his fist. Thump! The pirate leader's head exploded into a red mist. No warning. No projectile. Just a sudden, violent burst against the mine walls. One by one, the others followed like falling dominoes. Their heads popped in quick succession. The entire slaughter took less than 3 seconds. That's how players fight, Old Ba's voice cracked. I stared at the carnage. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead, but I didn't back down. Instead, a grin spread across my face. Perfect, I muttered. Saves me the trouble of doing it myself. I turned and grabbed the detonator. I looked toward the deep core nodes of the mine. Below us sat a high-pressure energy conduit that hadn't been drained. The blast would be enough to level everything within 3 kilometers. Tell Xiao Lu to start the engines, I barked at Old Ba. I need to be airborne in 5 minutes. I didn't wait for a reply. I bolted from the cover like a predator, sprinting toward the other side of the sector. 4 minutes and 53 seconds later, I stumbled onto the ship's deck. The fuse on the detonator in my hand had less than 10 seconds left. Take off. Full thrust. Xiao Lu practically had her eyes closed as she slammed the throttles forward. The ship groaned, vibrating violently as it tore away from the edge of the pit. Blue flames from the engines ripped through the air. The moment we hit 200 meters, the ground groaned. The earth buckled. Fire erupted from the cracks in the crust. Then, the entire mining area vanished in a chain reaction of white-hot fury. Debris and metal shards were tossed into the upper atmosphere, clattering against our shields like hail. The shockwave slammed into the back of the ship, surging us forward. Alarms screamed in the cockpit. I slumped into a seat, my back soaked with sweat. Get us clear, I said. My voice was thin. Xiao Lu's hands trembled as she stabilized the ship. Gradually, the sirens faded into a dull hum. Old Ba collapsed into a chair, gasping for air. We lived. We actually lived. I didn't respond. A cold, systematic chime echoed in my mind. Opponent level upgrade detected. Next game opponent, General Conrad Volker, 7th Frontier Fleet of the Alpha Federation. Level, Federation General. Warning, the target has identified your ship's serial number and flight path. Deployment for pursuit will be completed within 48 hours. The voice vanished. The cockpit fell silent, save for the hum of the engine. I stared into space for a few seconds, then leaned back and sighed. This game really doesn't let you breathe, does it? Old Ba and Xiao Lu looked at each other, their faces falling. A Federation General. That was a name you didn't run from. Not in a piece of junk like this. I closed my eyes. My mind was already racing. A general is still a man. And every man has a weakness. I opened my eyes, the familiar, manic smile returning to my lips. Xiao Lu, look up General Volker. Find out if he has any hobbies. Wine tastings, private parties, anything. She blinked, confused. What are you planning? I looked out at the black void of the stars. If a general is too hard to hunt, I'll just have to make him walk onto my battlefield himself. By the time I fully processed the threat, the cockpit lights were still flickering red. Boss, you're finally awake. Old Ba's voice came through the comms. We shook those maniacs, but the port armor is down 37%. We've only got enough juice for 2 more jumps. I rubbed my temples. The blast had left my ears ringing, but my head was clear. I looked at the system interface floating in my vision. The red text was glaring. I narrowed my eyes. Teammates? Where was I supposed to find those? Old Ba was a nervous wreck, and Xiao Lu was a kid. Sending them into a real fight was a death sentence. But if the system said I couldn't solo a general, it meant it. How long can the ship hold, Old Ba? 3 days if we stay quiet. Half a day if we get into a scrap. Before I could answer, the space in front of the ship warped. A white light flared, forming a massive holographic projection. A figure appeared, wearing a black robe and a silver mask. Mr. Lin Yuan. A pleasure. The voice was distorted, sounding like grinding metal. My name is Ulysses. I represent a certain secret organization. I'd like to invite you to a game. I tilted my head. Me? What kind of game? An underground game, Ulysses said. Participants wager their own resources, or their lives. The winner takes all. The loser dies. Xiao Lu jumped to her console. Boss, I've got a lock on the signal. He's less than 2 light years away. I ignored her, keeping my eyes on the masked man. Why would I agree to this? Because General Volker has already marked you, Ulysses said calmly. The 7th Fleet's net is closing. You can't outrun him. But in my game, you might find the power to fight back. But in this underground arena, you might just find enough leverage to take him down. Old Ba looked terrified. He reached out and tugged hard on my sleeve. Boss, this has to be a trap. It's too convenient. We get hunted, and suddenly someone shows up with intel. I looked at Old Ba, patted his shoulder, and then I burst out laughing. I laughed until I was doubled over, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Interesting. This is too interesting. I clutched my stomach, rolling on the floor like a complete lunatic. Out of the blue nest and straight into the tiger's den. I love this kind of thrill. Ulysses didn't seem to expect that reaction. He went silent for a few seconds before speaking again. So, I take it Mr. Lin Yuan is willing to participate. Of course I am. I stood up straight and wiped the tears from my eyes. I tilted my head, staring intensely at the holographic projection. But how do we play? There have to be rules. The rules are simple, Ulysses said calmly. I will provide coordinates. You come alone. There will be 4 other participants. Everyone shows their stakes and places their bids. The highest bidder wins the ultimate prize, intelligence on General Volker's fatal weakness. Xiao Lu was frantically signaling me, her lips trembling as she mouthed the words, "Don't go." I acted like I didn't see her and nodded. Fine. Send me the coordinates. The hologram flickered and vanished. A string of complex interstellar coordinates flashed onto the console screen. Old Ba nearly jumped out of his skin. Boss, are you insane? That guy didn't even take off his mask. Why would you trust him? I turned around, the madness in my eyes fading into cold, hard calculation. I don't trust him, obviously. I walked to the console and pointed at the coordinates. But Volker's head is only worth 30 million credits. Our ship is practically scrap metal, and we have exactly $500 left in the account. I'd rather gamble than sit here waiting to die. Xiao Lu's voice was shaking. But what if it really is a trap? Then we turn the trap into our hunting ground. I patted her shoulder. Xiao Lu, check the area around these coordinates for me. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. A few seconds later, her face went pale. It's an asteroid belt next to an abandoned mining zone. Sector 7. There's a derelict military base there from the old era. Pirates took it over 3 years ago, but the Federation wiped them out. Now it's completely deserted. The Huayu abandoned mining zone. The corners of my mouth curled into a deeper grin. Just a few hours ago, I had lured a player there to wipe out the Red Snake gang. Now, someone else wanted to meet in the exact same place. Either it was a massive coincidence, or someone had been watching me the entire time. Interesting, I whispered. I'll take the bet. Old Ba covered his face in despair. It's over. We're dead. The boss has finally lost it. I ignored him and walked to the weapons locker. I pulled open a drawer. Inside sat a pulse pistol and 2 smoke grenades. I picked up the gun and spun it around my finger. Xiao Lu, set the course. Target, Sector 7 abandoned base. My eyes were glowing with a strange intensity. I'm going to be the one to flip the cards in this game. Xiao Lu bit her lip, but eventually programmed the route. The ship let out a low roar, turning its nose toward the coordinates. 37 minutes later, we touched down on the gray, dusty surface of the asteroid. I threw on my protective suit and checked my gear one last time. Just as I was about to step out the hatch, a system message popped up. Warning, detected more than 4 high-level biological signals in the target area. 3 are above level 70. 1 is level 95. Area has been pre-fortified. Caution is advised. My hand froze on the door button. My smile stiffened. Level 95? That was 6 levels higher than General Volker. This wasn't a game invitation. I was being hunted. I stared at the warning, but slowly, my lips curled back up. Old Ba, switch the ship's power system to the external speakers. I turned and walked toward the cargo hold, my voice light, as if I were deciding what to have for dinner. Then, bring that old crate of mine to the hatch. Boss, that's military-grade kinetic gear. I told you to move it, so move it, I interrupted. I pulled a metal box out from a corner of the hold. I'd scavenged this thing from the black market 2 years ago. Today, it was finally going to be useful. Xiao Lu stared at the radar. 4 red dots were arranged in a perfect geometric pattern around the coordinate building. She didn't have much experience, but she'd spent enough time in the Federation's underbelly to recognize this. Brother Lin Yuan, this isn't a normal game. Her voice was a whisper. That's a textbook ambush. Any direction you break, toward will be covered by crossfire. Textbook, huh? I opened the iron box to reveal a set of questionable-looking lighting equipment. That's boring. Textbooks tell you to play it safe. Do they say anything about how to handle a madman? I grabbed the gear and headed for the door. The system flashed again. Suggested. Level 95 signal suspected to be Federation Agent 0. Specialist in psychological warfare and mental control. Recommendation. Use non-logical behavioral patterns to counter. I glanced at it. My grin widened. Non-logical behavior? The system had a fancy way of putting it. It just wanted me to act like a complete lunatic to confuse them. Old Ba, crank all the lights to max power. Aim them right at the front door of that building. When I give the signal, blast the loudest heavy metal music we've got. Boss, we only have 30% power left. Win this, and Volker's armory will have enough juice to refit this ship 10 times over. The hatch hissed open. Gray-yellow dust swirled in the vacuum sunlight. I wasn't wearing combat armor. I was just in my ragged, scavenged jumpsuit and a pair of plastic flip-flops I'd bought at a Junkstar flea market. I strolled toward the alloy building with a light, bouncy step, like a schoolboy on a field trip. Behind the one-way glass on the second floor, a low voice crackled. Target has appeared. Unarmed. No combat gear. Highly irregular. Inside the room, 6 holographic screens formed a semicircle. In the center sat a lean man. His face was so ordinary you'd forget it the moment you looked away. He wore a gray coat, looking no different from any other lowlife on a junk planet. The only thing special about him was his eyes. They were completely void of emotion. This was Agent 0, the Federation's deadliest psychological operative. I reached the front door. I didn't knock. Instead, I squatted down and started counting ants on the ground. 3 minutes later, the door slid open. A woman in a black uniform stood there, her expression icy. Mr. Lin Yuan, Mr. Ulysses is waiting for you. Wait, what number was I on? I looked up, looking completely serious. 56 or 57. You ruined my rhythm. I forgot. The agent didn't blink. Mr. Ulysses does not like to wait. He also does not like ants. I stood up and brushed the dirt off my hands. That's fine. I don't mind if he hates me. Plenty of people do. He'll have to take a number. I followed her inside. As we walked through the halls, my mind was racing. I'd already scanned the room 3 times. Once to mask my heart rate, once to control my muscle tension, and the third was for the surprise. A speaker crackled. Mr. Lin Yuan, welcome to my playroom. I was led into a massive circular hall. The walls were dark, gray metal plates, completely bare. In the center stood a round metal table with a holographic chessboard I didn't recognize. A game, I said, looking around. I knew the real match was just beginning. I stared up at the flickering light on the ceiling. It was dying, buzzing with a sharp, annoying rhythm. That light is broken, I said. You should change it. Mr. Chun, please sit. Agent Zero's voice came through hidden speakers. It was calm and warm, the kind of voice that tried to make you feel safe while it dissected your brain. I heard you won 5 rounds of truth or dare overnight in the underground, Zero said. And you used a very special item to do it. I sat down, crossed my legs, and started tapping the toe of my shoe against the metal table. That item broke. I threw it in the trash. I looked around the empty room with a bored expression. If you want to buy one, I've got 50 more just like it back at my junk pile. 300 credits each. No discounts. Zero paused. Mr. Chun, let's be direct. I only want to confirm one thing. Are you truly insane, or are you just pretending? I tilted my head, staring blankly at the wall. That's a boring question. Why don't you ask me why I think eating explosives is more filling than bread? Zero fell silent for 3 seconds. I knew what he was seeing on his monitors. My speech was erratic. My expressions were inconsistent. Every data point on his screen probably shouted mentally unstable. But he didn't believe it. Not yet. Mr. Chun, Zero said, dangling a lure. If you pass my psychological test, I can give you the transport route for General Volker's next weapons shipment. This is an authorization from Mr. Ulysses himself. My eyes lit up. A psychological test? I love those. Is it the one where you show me a color and I tell you what it reminds me of, and then I figure out if you're the one who stole my underwear? I heard Zero take a deep breath. It's a bit more complex than that. He tapped a keyboard. The holographic chessboard on the table shifted into a cluster of rotating geometric shapes. Tell me, within 3 seconds, which of these shapes does not belong with the others? I stared at the shapes for 2 seconds. Then, I suddenly stood up and kicked my chair over. I picked that one, I said, pointing at a power outlet in the corner of the room. Mr. Chun, that is a socket, Zero said. Exactly, I replied, acting like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because that's the only thing that can charge my phone. What are these trash shapes supposed to do? Can I eat them? Can they fix my spaceship? Zero's fingers froze over his keys. My logic was completely broken, yet in the context of a scavenger's life, it almost made sense. He was starting to doubt himself. One more chance, Mr. Chun. Zero adjusted his strategy. A new image appeared on the screen. A child crying in a pile of trash, surrounded by the ruins of war. What do you feel when you see this? I stared at the image for 5 seconds. Then I laughed. These special effects are terrible, I said, yawning. The kid's crying looks so fake. Do you guys spend all the intelligence department's money on weapons? You can't even make a decent psychological prompt. The broken projector back at my junk pile is clearer than this. Zero's gaze darkened. A normal person would show trauma or numbness. An antisocial personality would show coldness. But my reaction was so natural, so dismissive, that even a veteran like him couldn't find a crack in the mask. One last question, Zero said, his voice turning cold. What is General Volker most afraid of right now? I tilted my head, thought for 3 seconds, and then slammed my hand on the table. He's afraid that when I play truth or dare with him, I'll ask if he prefers men or dogs. Zero went completely silent. Actually, I added casually while he processed my nonsense. I heard General Volker is researching a new power armor. What was it called? Sky Dome 7, right? If I took that thing apart, would he be mad enough to die? I heard a sharp intake of breath. Sky Dome 7 was a top-secret Federation project. Most generals didn't even know the code name. And here I was, a deranged scavenger, tossing it out like common gossip. Mr. Chun, your invitation is complete, Zero said, his voice regaining its calm. Mr. Ulysses has prepared some food and chips in the next room. You may go. I stood up, patted the dust off my pants, and hummed a tuneless song as I walked out. The moment I crossed the threshold, my system interface flashed a notification. Asterisk player has successfully misled the enemy profiler. The target has tentatively accepted your insane persona. Warning, Zero has secretly planted a micro-tracker in the lining of your left collar, asterisk. I didn't stop walking. My smile didn't fade. I simply reached up to scratch my left shoulder, pinched the tiny tracker between my fingers, and flicked it into a nearby trash can. Back in the control room, Zero watched the signal stop moving inside the bin. He leaned back, trapped in a loop of suspicion. Was the intel about Sky Dome 7 a slip-up, or just another piece of bait? I didn't care. I had work to do. Back at my repair shed, Old Bao was crouching by the door, a half-smoked cigarette in his mouth and a wrench in his hand. Boss, you're really leaving? He asked. I stuffed the last batch of parts into my backpack. Yeah. Where to? The gray zone. The cigarette fell out of Old Bao's mouth. His eyes went wide. That lawless wasteland? The graveyard for Federation bounties? Are you sure? I zipped my bag and slapped the dust off my hands. Old Bao, the Federation is already watching me. If I stay on this junk planet, they'll dig me up eventually. Old Bao went quiet for a few seconds. Then he stood up abruptly. Then I'm coming too. No, I said. Why not? I turned to look at the man who had been my scavenger foreman for 3 months. You have a wife and kid here. If you come with me, what happens to them? His lips trembled, but he didn't push it. The sound of footsteps approached. Xiaolu walked in carrying 2 bowls of hot soup. She saw our faces and froze. What happened? The boss is leaving, Old Bao muttered. Xiaolu nearly spilled the soup. I took a bowl from her and took a sip of the hot liquid. The gray zone has something I need. The Federation is closing in faster than I expected. Every day I stay here is another day of risk. Xiaolu bit her lip. How do you plan to get there? The nearest civilian port is in orbit. Without a registered ID, you can't even get inside. I smiled. Who said I was going the legal route? I looked toward the southern district of the planet, the ruins controlled by the Vulture Gang. They ran the only illegal landing strip on the planet. Their smuggling routes covered the entire rim. If I wanted to vanish, I had to go through them. Half an hour later, I stood at the Vulture Gang's headquarters, a fortress built from the hull of a crashed warship. Two thugs holding energy rifles blocked my path. "Private property," one growled. "Get lost." I didn't stop. I kept that harmless, idiot smile on my face. "I want to talk business with your boss." "Boss doesn't have time for." The thug on the left suddenly clutched his mouth. His face went pale. System prompt. Target forced into a game. "You. What did you do?" the thug roared, his finger tightening on the trigger. I looked at him calmly. "Truth. Who is your boss's wife having an affair with?" The man froze. He didn't want to say it, but his mouth moved as if it were being yanked by invisible wires. "The vice chief." "Old he." The other thug's eyes nearly popped out of his head. I let out a low whistle. "Oh, now that's interesting," I said. I started walking past them. They tried to block me, but their bodies wouldn't obey. The system's pressure held them in place, forced to watch as I walked deep into their base. The leader of the Vulture Gang was a man they called the Butcher. He was 2 meters tall with 3 jagged scars running down his face. When I found him, he was sitting on a makeshift throne, a woman on his lap and a bottle of liquor in his hand. The Butcher saw me barge in and slammed his wine glass onto the floor. Shards of glass sprayed everywhere. He roared at me, demanding to know who the hell I was. I didn't flinch. I just told him I was the man bringing him a massive gift. I pulled over a chair and sat down with agonizing slowness. I took my time, eventually kicking my feet up onto his table. I looked him dead in the eye and asked if he knew his wife was sleeping with his vice chief. The entire hall went silent for 3 heartbeats. The Butcher's face cycled from a furious red to a deathly white, and finally to a sickly green. He screamed that I was a dead man and swung a massive fist at my head. The punch carried a gust of wind with it. I didn't move an inch. Just as his knuckles were 3 centimeters from my nose, his hand froze mid-air. Asterisk system prompt. Forced game initiated. Truth or dare? Asterisk. The muscles in the Butcher's face twitched violently. His rage evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He realized he couldn't control his own body. He gasped, asking if I was an esper. I didn't answer. I just pulled a coin from my pocket and told him to pick, truth or dare. A low, unwilling growl vibrated in his throat, but his mouth moved against his will. He chose dare. I snapped my fingers. I told him to go to the back mountain and run 3 laps completely naked. Right now? Everyone in the hall stood frozen, their jaws hitting the floor. They watched their majestic, terrifying boss stand up like a marionette on strings and start stripping off his clothes. His subordinates rushed forward to stop him, but the system didn't care. It pulled them all into the game's radius. Asterisk multiple targets detected. Dare penalty upgraded. Everyone strips. Asterisk. I stood up and patted the Butcher's stiff shoulder, telling him to be careful not to catch a cold out there. 15 minutes later, the backyard of the Vulture Gang's base was a scene of absolute chaos. The Butcher was sprinting through piles of junk stark naked, followed by a dozen of his men in the exact same state. Cries, roars, and the hysterical laughter of onlookers filled the air. The entire southern district was in an uproar. While the world was distracted by the naked parade, I slipped into the basement's smuggling control room. A technician wearing glasses was staring at a monitor. When he saw me, he reached for the alarm. I told him not to move. I pointed to a folder on the desk labeled Huayu Route and told him I only had one question. The man swallowed hard. He told me the next smuggling ship to Huayu was leaving at 10 tonight. It was disguised as a cargo ship, number 0721, departing from the abandoned shipyard in Sector C. I memorized the details and turned to leave. Before I walked out, I grabbed a can of paint and sprayed a message on the wall of the Vulture Gang's nest. Asterisk Fate's warning. Next stop, Huayu. Come and die. The madman, asterisk. I clapped the dust off my hands and smiled. When the pursuers saw this, they wouldn't think I was just running away. A lunatic who leaves a taunting message always has a bigger plan. By the time the Federation finished analyzing my intentions, I'd be long gone. By 9:30, I was standing in the shadows of the abandoned shipyard. I watched the disguised cargo ship loading up in the distance. Suddenly, Xiao Lu appeared out of nowhere, panting for breath. I frowned, asking what he was doing here. He hesitated, then finally asked if I could tell him one thing before I left. He wanted to know if I was actually a madman. I stared at him for a second, then burst into a loud laugh. I asked him what he thought, then turned toward the ship without waiting for an answer. The boarding bridge rose behind me. Xiaolu stood there watching the ship's exhaust tear through the night sky. Suddenly, gunfire erupted behind him. Lin Hao and a team of Federation agents charged into the port, screaming to stop the ship because the target was on board. I stood at the hatch and gave Lin Hao a long, slow wave. His face turned ashen. He raised his communicator, ready to order an orbital strike to block my path, but then he froze. He saw my lips moving. I was silently mouthing a sentence to him. Truth, you really were fooled by me. Lin Hao's hand stayed frozen in midair as the smuggling ship broke through the atmosphere and vanished into the stars. 3 hours later, I was leaning against a corner in the cargo hold. I rubbed the cold system coin in my pocket. The roar of the engines echoed through the metal walls. The ship wasn't big. Aside from the 2 pilots, there were 5 guys claiming to be interstellar merchants. I knew they were fakes the moment I saw them. They were too clean. Their clothes were ordinary, but the fabric was military grade. Real space haulers don't have time to look that polished. A bald man walked out of the cockpit, twirling a faded energy pistol and chewing on a cheap cigarette. He told me the pittance I paid wasn't enough for the fare. I blinked, telling him I had a deal with the butcher and that the Vulture gang had paid double. The bald man laughed. His friends joined in. He asked if I knew what that idiot butcher was doing right now. Apparently, he was still running naked when they took off. I didn't laugh. I just stared at him with a gaze so calm it made them uneasy. I asked if they were trying to raise the price. The man stopped smiling. His finger rested on the trigger. He told me they didn't want a price hike. They wanted everything I had. He stepped closer, towering over me. He knew anyone being hunted by the Federation who could make the butcher run naked had to have something valuable. I stayed silent for 3 seconds. Then, I grinned, showing my teeth. I asked him if he wanted to play a game. The bald man looked at his buddies, confused. I pulled the coin out and flipped it. It caught the dim light, making him squint. I told him we were playing truth or dare. If I won, they took me for free. If I lost, everything I owned was theirs. He scoffed, thinking it was just a simple gamble. He gathered his men around. I explained the rules. I'd flip the coin, and he'd guess heads or tails. If he guessed right, he could ask me anything, and I had to be honest. If he guessed wrong, he had to choose truth or dare. He thought it was a joke. I flicked the coin with my thumb. It spun through the air and landed on the back of my hand. He guessed heads. I revealed the coin. Tails. I looked at him and told him to pick. He shrugged and chose truth. I shifted my position and asked him a casual question. Why was the last person he killed murdered? The bald man's face stiffened. The room went dead quiet. After 5 seconds, he muttered that the guy owed money and wouldn't pay. Liar, I said instantly. His brow furrowed into a knot as he opened his mouth to protest. Suddenly, the bald man's mouth seemed to move on its own. His brow furrowed into a tight knot, and he glared at me with pure hatred. He tried to stay silent, but the words forced their way out. He confessed that he killed the man because the guy had slept with his woman. The room went dead quiet. The bald man's face turned a deep, angry red. His knuckles cracked as he squeezed his fists. I just sat there and smiled. That was the rule of truth or dare. You couldn't lie. We started the second round. The bald man was much more serious now. He kept his eyes glued to the coin. I flicked it into the air and let it fall. He guessed tails. I revealed the coin. It was heads. He had lost again. I asked him what he wanted to pick. He gritted his teeth and chose dare. I pointed to a bottle of cheap liquor on the table. I told him to pour the whole thing over his head. His eyes widened, but the lesson from the last round kept him from resisting. He grabbed the bottle, twisted off the cap, and let the liquid drench his face and collar. He looked miserable. He growled at me to go again. In the third round, he finally won. He immediately demanded to know who I was and why the Federation was hunting me. I shrugged and told him my name was Lin Yuan. I was just a scavenger. As for why the Federation wanted me, that was a second question. I held out my hand, telling him we had to finish the game first. I won the fourth round. I won the fifth. By the sixth round, He managed a narrow victory, but he was drenched in sweat. He realized that the only times he won were the times I let him. I wasn't a threat to him physically, but I was ruining him. He slammed his hand on the table and stood up, pointing his gun at my head. I didn't flinch. I actually leaned closer to the barrel. I told him if he couldn't handle losing, he shouldn't play. His finger was halfway through pulling the trigger when he suddenly froze. He saw my eyes. The playful look was gone. My eyes felt like two deep, dark wells reflecting a cold light. I was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that made your blood run cold. He had seen killers before, but I looked like someone who was perfectly ready to die. I suggested one last round. My voice was calm, like we were just chatting. This time, the loser would have to accept whatever punishment the winner chose. No options. No mercy. He swallowed hard and looked at his men. They were all silent. He slammed his gun on the table and agreed. I tossed the coin. Every eye in the room followed that flash of silver. It landed. I revealed my hand. Heads. I won. I stood up, my voice cutting through the roar of the ship's engine. I told him to tell me the truth. Where was the hidden cargo on this ship? His pupils shrunk. He tried to play dumb, but I leaned in close. I told him men like them didn't risk a trip to the Huiyu region for a few spare coins. This cheap ship was carrying something valuable, or they wouldn't even be able to afford their cigarettes. His lips trembled. He wanted to lie, but the power of the game forced his mouth open. He confessed it was in a hidden compartment under the third floorboard. I stood up and walked to the spot. I pried up the floorboard, revealing a row of metal crates. Inside were Federation-issue pulse rifles. Contraband. Just then, the ship's comms chirped. It was the Huiyu garrison. They were demanding our identification. The bald man looked at me in a panic, but I just sat back down and tossed a magazine in my hand. I told him to keep flying and lose the garrison. Once we hit Huiyu, I needed to find a buyer. He finally realized I was never just a passenger. We reached the Huiyu checkpoint, a massive steel structure floating in the dark cosmic dust. It looked like a giant beast with its mouth open. The bald man's hands shook on the controls. He told me it was a black shark pirate checkpoint and that they were in league with the garrison. He asked if we should force our way through. I leaned back and told him to get closer. We were there to do business. The comms crackled with a rough voice ordering us to cut our engines for inspection. I stood up and patted the bald man on the shoulder. I told him to stay put while I went to talk. He thought I was insane. The airlock hissed open. 5 pirates in mismatched armor marched in. The leader was a burly man with a thick beard carrying a modified energy shotgun. He demanded to know where the cargo was. I met his gaze lazily and told him I wanted to talk to his captain about a bigger deal. He asked what I had to offer. I pulled out my silver coin and flipped it. I asked him if he had ever played Truth or Dare. The pirates laughed, and the leader pressed his gun against my chest, telling me my brain must be fried from radiation. The coin spun up and landed with a sharp metallic click. I told the captain he had just accepted the game. His laughter stopped instantly. He looked down at his hand. He had caught the coin without thinking. The system notification exploded in my mind. The game was on. The pirate leader started cursing, but then his body moved against his will. He began ripping off his armor, then his shirt, then his pants. His men watched in horror as their captain stripped down to his underwear. His dare was simple: run from one end of the checkpoint to the other without stopping. I leaned against the wall and told him not to dawdle. His eyes were bloodshot with rage, but his legs wouldn't stop moving. He stumbled out of the ship and began sprinting down the steel corridor in nothing but his shorts. His men scrambled after him, shouting in confusion. The entire station watched as their commander lost his mind. While everyone was distracted by the show, I made my move. I watched the pirates stare at their captain in disbelief. This was my chance. While everyone was distracted by the absurd scene, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a smoke grenade. I pulled the pin and tossed it right into the middle of the crowd. A thick cloud of gray smoke erupted with a hiss. The alarms began to scream, their high-pitched wail cutting through the confusion. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" the pirates shouted. I stayed low in the haze, pressing my body against the outer guardrails of the checkpoint as I slipped away. My comms crackled. It was Guang Tu, his voice low and panicked. He asked me what the plan was. I told him to reverse and take the emergency lane on the right. He hesitated, warning me that the area was a graveyard of space reefs. I told him it was still better than being killed by pirates. I cut the connection before he could argue. I vaulted over a low barrier. I found myself behind the station's control room. A small shuttle sat on a maintenance platform, its engines humming with a low vibration. A pirate engineer stood there in his uniform, jaw dropped, completely mesmerized by the chaos I had caused. He never even heard me approach. I delivered a precise strike to the back of his neck. He crumpled to the floor instantly. I jumped into the pilot's seat. It was still warm from his body. I gripped the controls and slammed the thrusters forward. The shuttle roared to life and shot away from the platform. As I hit the atmosphere of Huiyu, the turbulence became a violent roar. The ship shook with a bone-jarring force, but I didn't let go. I was finally out.